The morning sun rose gently over Charlotte, North Carolina, soft rays spilling across quiet suburban streets lined with manicured lawns and gleaming SUVs. The city was alive with ambition, where every office tower whispered stories of success, and every face on the street carried dreams as big as the skyline. But that morning, one girl didn't belong in that picture-perfect scene. Her name was Tiana Brooks, a 12-year-old with determined brown eyes and worn-out sneakers that slapped against the pavement as she ran. Her jacket was faded, her jeans torn at the knees, not from style but from struggle. Tiana clutched a small yellow backpack to her chest as if it carried something precious or dangerous. She wasn't running from home, not exactly. She was running toward something. That morning she'd woken up with a trembling feeling she couldn't explain. Her grandmother always told her, "Baby, when your heart whispers, you better listen. It might be God trying to warn you." And right now, Tiana's heart wasn't whispering. It was screaming. She'd seen something the night before. Something that didn't make sense, and it led her here to the edge of a quiet, gated community on the outskirts of Charlotte. The place was too clean, too peaceful. Expensive silence. The kind that only money could buy. As she walked along the pristine sidewalk, she felt out of place, like a stain on white silk. Her breath fogged up in the cool morning air as she approached a house she had only seen once before. A tall, glass-paneled mansion belonging to Daniel Reeves, the CEO of Reeves Technologies. Everyone in Charlotte knew his name. The media called him the man who built the future. He was young, sharp, and ruthless in business. But to his employees, he was simply Mr. Reeves, the man who demanded perfection and left no room for mistakes. Tiana had no reason to know him, but she did, and what she knew could destroy him. Inside the Reeves mansion, Daniel was finishing a phone call when the doorbell rang. His tone was clipped, his posture firm, the kind of man who controlled rooms without raising his voice. His assistant had already arrived to drop off reports, but this visit felt different. "Who is it?" Daniel asked, adjusting his tie. No answer. Just the faint sound of breathing from the other side of the door. He opened it, and there she was. A small girl with anxious eyes, gripping her backpack tightly. She looked like she hadn't eaten or slept properly in days. "Sir," she began, but her voice broke. She took a step forward, then froze. Don't open that door." Daniel blinked, confused. "I already did," he said softly. "What's going on? Who are you?" Tiana's lips trembled. "You have to listen to me. Please. Something bad is about to happen in your house." Her words were trembling, desperate, the kind that made no sense but carried the weight of truth. Daniel frowned. He had a meeting in 10 minutes, and he didn't have time for strange little girls and cryptic warnings. Yet something about her eyes, that raw fear, made him pause. Behind her, a delivery van rolled down the street slowly. Nothing unusual, except the driver was staring at them too long. Tiana's eyes darted toward the van and then back to Daniel. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice softening. "If you're lost, I can call someone." She stepped forward suddenly, grabbing his sleeve. "No. Don't open that other door. Please." Daniel froze. He hadn't told anyone he was about to open the side door to let in a technician, a man coming to fix the security cameras that morning. How could this girl possibly know that? The doorbell rang again, the side door this time. Daniel's phone buzzed. "Technician here. Ready for the maintenance check." He frowned. The appointment was real. Was on the schedule. Nothing seemed wrong. But Tiana's eyes widened as the bell rang again. "He's not who he says he is," she whispered. "Please, sir, don't let him in." Daniel stared at her, torn between logic and instinct. "How do you know that?" She hesitated, clutching her backpack tighter. "Because I heard him. Last night. At the storage yard behind your company's building. He was talking on the phone, about coming here. About you." Daniel felt a chill run through his chest. "That's impossible. You must be mistaken." "I'm not," she insisted. He said something about getting what's inside. He mentioned your house alarm code and her voice dropped to a whisper, your son's name. Daniel's eyes went wide. No one outside his family knew his son's name, Caleb. The sound of footsteps approached from the side yard. Heavy, measured. The technician was here. Daniel slowly reached for the handle, half convinced this was all nonsense, half afraid the girl was right. Stay here, he said, motioning toward the living room. I'll handle it. But before he could touch the door, Tiana screamed, Don't open that door. Her voice echoing through the mansion with a rawness that froze him mid-step. The handle turned from the outside. Daniel backed away instinctively, eyes darting toward the hallway where his son was playing upstairs. His heart pounded. The van outside revved its engine. For a brief second, everything went silent, too silent. Then a voice came through the door. Come. Measured. Mr. Reeves? Maintenance check, sir. You scheduled me for 9 a.m. Daniel swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. He unlocked the door halfway but didn't open it fully. Let me see your badge. The man's voice paused, just a beat too long. And in that pause, Daniel made a choice. He slammed the deadbolt shut. Get off my property. The footsteps outside shifted. Then the sound of retreating gravel. The van pulled away. Tiana let out a shaky breath. Her eyes glistened with tears, relief mixed with terror. You believed me? Daniel didn't answer. He walked to the window, watching the van disappear around the corner. His phone buzzed again, security system offline. Maintenance required. His chest tightened. If the technician wasn't real, how did the company's system mark the visit as confirmed? He turned to Tiana. Start talking. Who are you and how do you know all this? The girl hesitated. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me, he said firmly. She reached into her backpack, slowly, and pulled out a crumpled photo. Daniel took it, frowning as he looked closer. It was a picture of his late wife, Elena Reeves. And standing beside her was Tiana. His hands went cold. How do you know my wife? He whispered, staring at the girl. Tiana's eyes filled with tears. Because, Mr. Reeves, she saved me once. And before she died, she told me to find you and warn you when the time came. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky was still clear. Daniel stood frozen, photo in hand, as Tiana's words settled like dust in the air. She wasn't lying, not with that voice, not with those eyes. And whatever storm she had just brought to his doorstep was only beginning. Daniel Reeves stood frozen in his own living room, the world around him blurring into silence. The sound of the ticking clock on the wall felt louder than his own heartbeat. In his hand was the photograph, the one that made no sense, the one that shouldn't exist. His late wife, Elena, smiling in a small-town park somewhere, and beside her stood this same girl, Tiana. The same wide brown eyes. The same cautious smile. But the date on the back of the photo was the problem, 2018. That was 6 years ago. Tiana would have been around 6 years old. But Daniel had never seen her in his life. He felt a shiver crawl up his neck. This isn't possible, he murmured, his voice breaking. Elena never mentioned you. Tiana looked down, clutching her yellow backpack. She didn't want to, she said softly. She said if she ever told you, you'd stop her from helping. Helping who? Daniel pressed. Tiana hesitated, then looked up, her small voice trembling. Me. Daniel stared at her, confused. Elena was a pediatric surgeon, brilliant, compassionate, always chasing ways to save children others had given up on. It wasn't impossible that she'd helped a little girl, but why keep that a secret? Why hide this? And why, 6 years later, was this girl suddenly standing in his doorway warning him not to open a door? He took a deep breath, forcing his voice to calm. Start from the beginning, Tiana. Tell me what happened. She nodded, settling nervously onto the edge of his couch. Her fingers played with the hem of her jacket, frayed and faded from years of wear. When she began to speak, her voice carried both innocence and something else, a weight no child should carry. "It was a long time ago," she said quietly. "We were living near a clinic in Raleigh. My grandma got really sick, and your wife, Dr. Reeves, she helped her for free. Grandma said she was an angel sent from heaven. But one night she came to our house in a hurry. She told Grandma we had to leave, that some people were watching her, and she didn't want me to be found." Daniel's brows furrowed. "Watching her? Who?" Tiana shook her head. "She didn't say. Only that I should keep this photo and that one day someone would try to hurt you too. She said if that day ever came I should find you, and tell you not to open the door." Daniel sat back, his mind spinning. It didn't add up. Elena died in a car crash 2 years ago, a story the media mourned for months. A tragic accident on a rainy night while returning from a conference. But this girl, she was suggesting something else entirely. He turned the photo over again, scanning for clues. The park in the picture had a small white gazebo in the background, a local landmark maybe. Where was this taken? "Shelby Park," Tiana replied quickly. "I remember because she bought me ice cream there. I got it all over her coat and she laughed." Daniel's chest tightened. He remembered that coat, pale beige with a coffee stain she never managed to get out. Tiana wasn't lying. Somehow she had met Elena. But what did Elena mean by "don't open the door"? And who were they? The sharp trill of his phone startled him. He picked it up. It was his head of security. "Sir, there's been an incident," the voice said. "One of the maintenance vans was found abandoned downtown. The ID on the technician was fake. We're pulling footage now." Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. "Send it to me immediately." He hung up and met Tiana's eyes. "You were right," he said quietly. "That man wasn't a technician." Tiana's voice barely rose above a whisper. "They're already close, Mr. Reeves. You can't trust anyone who comes to your door." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air in the mansion felt heavy, the kind that made your chest tight. Daniel walked to the fireplace and looked at Elena's photo framed above it. Her smile stared back, warm, familiar, and now filled with new secrets. He felt something twist inside him. Why would his wife hide this from him? And if what Tiana said was true, had Elena known she was in danger before she died? He turned back to Tiana. "You said you heard that man last night near my company building. Why were you there?" Her lips trembled. "I was looking for food." Daniel's expression softened. "You're homeless?" She nodded silently. "Grandma passed last year. I've been staying near the old freight yard, sometimes at the shelter when it's open." He felt a pang of guilt mixed with something else, admiration. Despite her fear, she was brave enough to walk miles to his home just to warn him. But beneath that sympathy was still a burning question. How did she know so much? That evening, as rain began to streak the tall windows, Daniel replayed the security footage his team had sent. He sat in his home office, Tiana curled up on a couch nearby, her head resting against her backpack. The video showed the fake technician walking toward the Reeves mansion, clipboard in hand, uniform spotless. But what caught Daniel's attention wasn't the man, it was the logo on the van. It wasn't one of his company's regular contractors. It was from a firm that used to work with Reeves Technologies, one Daniel had terminated years ago for internal fraud. A name flashed on the screen, Dynasec Industries. Daniel's stomach dropped. Dynasec wasn't just a maintenance contractor, they were cybersecurity specialists. He'd fired them after uncovering that they were selling internal access codes to competitors overseas. If they were back, this wasn't about burglary or theft. It was something much bigger. He exhaled sharply and turned to Tiana. "You said the man was talking about getting what's inside." "Inside what?" Tiana hesitated, eyes darting away. "I think he meant your basement." Daniel frowned. "The basement? There's nothing down there except old records and He stopped himself. And Elena's sealed storage box. It was a chest he'd never opened since the accident, the one she'd kept locked with a password, refusing to let anyone near it. Her personal files, her research notes, and her old laptop were all inside. Suddenly, a wave of unease washed over him. Could that box be what they were after? He stood abruptly, his voice low. "Stay here," he told Tiana. "Don't move." He walked down the hallway, past the flickering light above the staircase, and descended into the dim basement. The smell of dust and metal filled the air. The chest sat there beneath a tarp, exactly where he'd left it, untouched for 2 years. He knelt down and brushed the dust from its surface. The digital lock still blinked faintly, waiting for a code. He hesitated. Was this what Elena meant to protect? And why did she never tell him about it? "Mr. Reeves?" Tiana's small voice echoed from the stairs, nervous but curious. He turned slightly. "I told you to stay upstairs." "I couldn't," she said softly. "I heard something. Outside the window." Daniel froze. He grabbed a flashlight and moved toward the basement window. It looked out toward the back lawn, where the rain now fell heavier. A faint shadow moved past the fence. Not a trick of the light. Someone was out there. He reached for his phone. "Security, send a patrol to my residence immediately," he ordered. But before the guard could respond, the lights flickered, then went out completely. The entire mansion plunged into darkness. Upstairs, Tiana screamed. "They're here." Daniel sprinted up the steps, heart pounding. The backup lights glowed faintly in the hallway, illuminating Tiana clutching her backpack with tears streaming down her face. "I told you," she cried. "I told you they'd come." A thunderclap roared outside. Daniel looked through the window. A black SUV was parked at the end of the driveway, engine idling, headlights off. He backed away, his mind racing. This wasn't random. They wanted what Elena had left behind, and now they knew he had it. He turned to Tiana. "We need to leave. Now." But Tiana shook her head fiercely. "No. If you run, they'll find you." She said the safest place is under the house. "What?" he asked, confused. "Who said that?" "Elena," Tiana whispered. "Before she died, she told me there's something hidden beneath the basement floor. That's why they're coming." Daniel stared at her in shock. "There's nothing under the basement." The sound of shattering glass cut him off. The window by the kitchen exploded inward. He grabbed Tiana's hand and ran toward the basement door. "Go," he shouted. "Now." They rushed down the steps just as a dark figure entered through the kitchen, flashlight cutting through the blackness. Daniel locked the basement door behind them, his chest heaving. Tiana's whisper trembled. She said, "When the lights go out, follow the sound of the hum." "What hum?" he asked. She pointed toward the corner of the basement where the old storage shelves stood. "That one." Daniel listened. Through the storm and his own heartbeat, he heard it, a faint, mechanical hum behind the wall. Something hidden. Something alive. He moved the shelf aside, revealing a small steel panel with a keypad. The light above it blinked softly, green, not red. He turned to Tiana. "You've been here before, haven't you?" Her eyes glistened. "Only once. With her." Daniel swallowed hard. "What's behind this wall?" Tiana took a deep breath, her voice steady but trembling. "The truth about why your wife really died." The basement was cold, the kind of cold that seeps through the floor and into your bones. Daniel's breath came out in shallow, misty clouds as he stared at the faintly blinking panel on the wall. The light pulsed green. A hum whispered behind the steel. He turned to Tiana, who stood clutching her backpack, her eyes wide in the dim glow. "You said Elena brought you here once. What did she show you?" Tiana hesitated, her voice small. "She told me there was something down here, something she built to protect people. But she said if anyone tried to open it without her, bad things would happen." Daniel's pulse quickened. "What kind of things?" "She didn't say." just that she'd hidden the code inside a memory only love could unlock. He frowned. A memory? Tiana nodded. She said you'd know it when the time came. Outside, thunder rumbled again, deep and distant, shaking the foundation. The power was still out. Somewhere above them, faint footsteps creaked across the wooden floor. Daniel's security detail was still 10 minutes away, if they weren't already compromised. He moved closer to the wall, running his fingers along the steel edge. The keypad was covered in dust, but when he wiped it clean, he noticed a faint engraving below the screen. ER Vault, 2018. Elena Reeves. His wife had built this. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. What did you get me into, Elena? Tiana took a cautious step closer. Maybe it's something good, she whispered. Something they don't want you to find. Daniel exhaled, steadying himself. Or something I was never meant to see. He typed a random sequence into the keypad. 0527, Elena's birthday. The panel beeped once, then flashed red. Incorrect code. He tried again, 1209, their anniversary. Red again. A small mechanical click followed by a metallic hiss echoed through the basement ceiling. Tiana grabbed his arm. You hear that? Daniel nodded. They're coming closer. He backed away from the wall, searching for anything that could buy them time. His eyes caught a crowbar leaning by the old furnace. He grabbed it and motioned for Tiana to hide behind the storage crates. The footsteps above grew louder, slower, deliberate, like someone tracing their position. Then a voice, muffled through the floorboards, called out. Mr. Reeves, we just want what belongs to us. Daniel froze. That voice didn't belong to one of his guards. It was calm, male, too polite to be a burglar. He whispered, Stay quiet. The man spoke again, his tone sharper. You're wasting time. Open the vault and nobody gets hurt. Daniel's jaw tightened. They know about the vault. He yelled back, Who are you? No answer. Just silence, heavy, deliberate silence. Then the sound of drilling. They were trying to break through the door. Daniel's eyes darted to the keypad again. He knew he couldn't guess the code by luck. Think, he muttered. Something only love could unlock. His mind flooded with memories, their wedding, their trips, the way Elena laughed when she spilled coffee on his favorite tie, the lullabies she used to hum when she thought he wasn't listening. Then he remembered something, their private phrase. Elena used to whisper it every night before bed. Love you past tomorrow? He typed it in. LOVYOU past TTOMOROW. The keypad flashed green. A low rumble shook the ground as the steel panel slid open, revealing a narrow passageway lit by soft blue lights. Tiana gasped. It worked. Daniel turned to her, voice low. Let's go. They stepped inside and the door sealed shut behind them, muffling the drilling from above. The passage descended deeper underground, cool air brushing against their faces. At the end of the tunnel stood a glass chamber, sleek, silent, and humming faintly with energy. Inside was a tall, transparent cylinder filled with shimmering liquid. And floating in the liquid was a black box about the size of a small briefcase. Tiana's eyes widened. Is that what she was protecting? Daniel approached the glass. Looks like some kind of data core. He wiped a thin layer of condensation off the surface and noticed Elena's handwriting scrawled faintly on a label. Project Evermore, for when truth needs a voice. He stepped closer, his chest tightening. Evermore, that was the name she'd once used for her secret medical initiative, a system that could identify corruption in pharmaceutical testing. She'd said it was too powerful to ever be sold, that too many people would kill to control it. Project Evermore, he whispered. She finished it. Tiana frowned. So this is what they're after? Yeah, Daniel muttered. And now we have it. He reached for the release lever on the glass chamber, but as his fingers touched the panel, the lights flickered, then shifted from blue to red. A warning tone filled the tunnel. System breach detected. Tiana clutched her backpack. What's happening? Daniel turned, scanning for a control console. They must have hacked the power grid. The system's locking down. The passage door behind them began to vibrate, heavy bangs echoing through the steel. They found us, Daniel hissed. Suddenly the speaker above them crackled. A voice filtered through the static, cold, methodical. You shouldn't have opened it, Daniel. He froze. He knew that voice. It was Ronan Vale, the former director of DynSEC Industries. The man Daniel had fired and publicly exposed for espionage years ago. We could have done this quietly, Ronan continued. But now you've forced my hand. Daniel shouted, You're a coward hiding behind wires. You think you can threaten me? A low chuckle came through the intercom. Not threaten. Just finish what your wife started, the right way. The right way. Daniel snapped. She trusted me with this. She trusted the wrong man, Ronan said. Ask the girl beside you. She knows what really happened. Daniel turned sharply toward Tiana. What's he talking about? Tiana's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head quickly. Don't listen to him. Oh, he should, Ronan said calmly. Because that photo you found? It wasn't the only one Elena kept. There are more, hundreds more, of her and that girl. Ask yourself, Daniel, what kind of mother hides her child? The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He stared at Tiana, his voice trembling. That's not true, is it? Tiana's silence said enough. Her gaze dropped to the ground. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. Daniel stepped back, disbelief flooding his voice. What do you mean, find out? Tiana, what is he talking about? Tears rolled down her cheeks. She promised she'd tell you one day. That she'd fix everything first. But she ran out of time. Daniel's throat tightened. You're saying? She was my mom too, Tiana whispered. I'm your daughter. The world seemed to tilt beneath him. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The hum of the machines faded into static as the words sank in. His wife. The woman he thought he'd known better than anyone. She'd kept another child a secret. A daughter born before they'd even met. A daughter she'd protected from the world, and from him. Daniel backed away, shaking his head. No. This isn't, you can't be. Tiana opened her backpack and pulled out a small locket. Inside was a picture of Elena holding baby Tiana, and another torn down the middle. The missing half was of him. I didn't believe it either, Tiana said softly. Until I found this. Above them the intercom crackled again. Touching, isn't it? Ronan's voice sneered. Elena thought she could hide her sins. But secrets always surface, especially the ones buried underground. Daniel's grief twisted into anger. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but I do, Ronan replied. That vault she built, it's not just data. It's proof that she used your company to fund Evermore. She stole your technology, Daniel. And now I'll take back what's mine. The banging on the vault door grew louder. The steel began to bend. Daniel clenched his jaw. He's not taking anything. He turned to Tiana, his voice low but steady. You're coming with me. We finish what your mother started. She nodded, wiping her tears. Daniel slammed the lever, opening the glass chamber. The liquid drained, revealing the black box, sleek, metallic, humming with faint energy. He grabbed it carefully and slipped it into his coat. The moment he did, the vault door burst open. 3 armed men stormed in, flashlights slicing through the red light. Daniel shoved Tiana behind him. Run. They sprinted down the narrow tunnel as bullets ricocheted off the walls. The exit ahead glowed faintly, the far end of the underground passage. Tiana reached it first, slamming the emergency latch. The door opened to the outside world, the storm still raging. Daniel dove through just as the tunnel behind them exploded in sparks. They collapsed in the mud, rain soaking their clothes. Tiana gasped for air. What do we do now? Daniel looked back at the smoke rising from the tunnel. He clutched the black box tighter. We find out what's inside, he said. Because whatever she died protecting, it's something worth dying for. The following morning, the sun barely peeked through the gray Seattle clouds when Tasha woke up, drenched in sweat. Her heart pounded in her chest as flashes of the previous night returned. The door, the whispers, and the unbearable sense that someone or something was on the other side. She sat up, rubbing her face, trying to convince herself it was all a dream. It's just stress, she whispered to herself. That's all. But the voice in her head wasn't convinced. Neither was the eerie silence in the hallway. As she got ready for work, Tasha hesitated at her bedroom door. The corridor stretched out long and narrow, ending with that same old door she was warned not to open. It looked perfectly ordinary in daylight, painted over in pale beige like the rest of the house. But she swore she could still feel it watching her, if that was even possible. She shook off the thought and left for work, needing fresh air and distraction. At Hartley Dynamics headquarters, the morning buzzed with the usual energy. Assistants hurried around with coffee, printers hummed, and conversations overlapped in the open-floor office. Tasha arrived early, wearing her navy blazer and a thin smile. "Morning, Tasha," called out Julian, the company's tech director, a charming 30-something guy who always carried an iced coffee. "Morning," she replied, grateful for his easy warmth. But as soon as she entered the boardroom, her attention snapped toward Andrew. He looked different today, tired, distracted, almost haunted. When their eyes met, he nodded politely, but his expression carried something heavier than a sleepless night. He had the same look she had seen in herself last night, fear. The meeting dragged on for an hour before Andrew called for a short break. As everyone stepped out, he caught Tasha's gaze and said quietly, "Stay for a minute." She froze. Her heart began to race again. When the door closed behind the last employee, Andrew spoke in a low voice. "Did you hear anything strange last night?" Tasha's eyes widened. "What?" "Just answer," he pressed, eyes sharp. "You heard it too, didn't you?" She swallowed hard. "You mean the door?" Andrew looked down, visibly shaken. "So it started again." "Again?" Tasha demanded. "What are you talking about?" He paced the room, running a hand through his hair. "That door isn't supposed to exist anymore. I had it sealed years ago, before I even bought that house back." Her mind spun. "Wait, what do you mean bought it back?" Andrew exhaled heavily, his voice trembling as he spoke. "It belonged to my family a long time ago. My father, he used that room for something terrible. When he died, I had the place gutted. I made sure that door was locked, plastered over, and forgotten." Tasha felt her knees weaken. "You're saying there's something in there?" He looked her straight in the eye. "There's something that was left behind. Something that shouldn't still be there." That night, Tasha couldn't rest. She sat in her small living room, staring at her phone, rereading a dozen unsent messages to Andrew. Every version started with, "We need to talk about the door." But something inside her told her not to reach out yet, not until she understood what she had actually heard. Just after midnight, as the wind howled outside, the power flickered again. Her heart pounded. She grabbed her phone, its glow illuminating the dark hallway. The silence stretched like a thread. Then faintly, whispers. They weren't coming from inside the room this time. They were in the walls, like a chorus humming through the drywall. Tasha's breath caught. The voices grew louder, not menacing but pleading. Desperate. She couldn't make out the words until one of them, a woman's voice, broke through clearly. "Tasha, please, don't let him in." Her stomach dropped. She backed away slowly, phone shaking in her hand. Then something thudded from inside the door. Once, twice. Her instinct screamed to run. But before she could move, she saw the doorknob turn, just slightly, like someone was testing it from the other side. She gasped, stumbling backward and knocking over a lamp. The noise stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. The next morning, Andrew showed up unannounced. He stood at her front door, pale and sleepless. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said yesterday," he admitted. "I need to see that door again." Tasha hesitated, but the way he said it, almost like an apology, made her let him in. They stood side by side in the hallway facing the door. "This is where I heard it," she said softly. "The voice. It said my name." Andrew clenched his fists. "That voice isn't supposed to exist anymore." "What do you mean?" His gaze darkened. "Because the woman who used to say those words has been dead for 15 years. Tasha froze. "Who was she?" He took a deep breath. "My sister." And just as the words sank in, the door rattled again. Both of them jumped. This time the sound wasn't just knocking. It was weeping. Soft human weeping. Andrew's face turned white. He whispered, "It's her." As the door trembled softly and the air turned cold around them, Tasha whispered, "Andrew, what did your sister do in there?" He didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the doorknob, now turning slowly on its own. The sound of the doorknob twisting filled the narrow hallway like a scream that no one could hear. Andrew froze. His breath caught somewhere between disbelief and terror, while Tasha instinctively stepped back, her trembling hand gripping the edge of the wall for balance. The door stopped moving, but not before the faint click of an unlocked latch echoed through the quiet. For a full minute, neither of them moved. The air was heavy, thick with something unseen but very much alive. "Andrew," Tasha whispered, her voice shaking. "What's happening?" He didn't respond right away. His eyes were glued to that door, the same way someone might stare down an open grave. Finally, he said in a low, distant voice, 15 years ago, that room was sealed because of what happened to my sister, Eliza." "Eliza?" Tasha repeated, the name foreign yet suddenly haunting. He nodded. "She was only 19. Brilliant but troubled. My father pushed her too hard. That room used to be her study, the one place she could shut him out. Until one night she didn't come out." Tasha felt chills run down her arms. "What do you mean?" "She locked the door," he said softly. "And by morning she was gone. No body. No note. Just gone." Tasha swallowed hard. "Gone where?" "No one knows." His voice cracked. "The police assumed she ran away. But I knew better. My father ordered that room sealed the next day." He never spoke about it again. A heavy silence fell between them. The story hung in the air like fog, suffocating and cold. Tasha looked at the door again. "So you think she's still in there?" Andrew didn't answer, but his hand moved toward the doorknob. "Wait," Tasha said sharply, grabbing his wrist. "You can't just open it. Not after what we've heard." He looked at her, eyes hollow. "I need to know what's inside." "Then let's call someone," she insisted. "A professional. Police, anyone." He shook his head. "No one would believe this. They'd call me insane." The door creaked suddenly as though mocking them. Both of them jumped. Then a faint whisper slid through the crack beneath the door, soft and female. "Andrew?" It was his sister's voice. Tasha stepped back. Andrew's face went pale as a sheet. "Eliza?" he whispered. "Andrew, please," the voice whimpered. "Help me." Against every rational thought, Andrew twisted the knob. The latch gave way easily, like it had been waiting for years. The door groaned open an inch, releasing a gust of air that smelled faintly of burnt wood and something metallic, like blood. "Stop," Tasha hissed, gripping his arm. "You don't know what's in there." But he pushed the door open wider, and the hallway lights flickered violently. The room beyond was pitch black, swallowing the weak light like a void. "Get a flashlight," he muttered, stepping forward. Tasha wanted to scream at him, but her voice caught in her throat. She found her phone, switched on the flashlight, and followed. Inside, the air was colder. Dust floated in thin rays of light, and the faint outline of old furniture took shape, a writing desk, a small bed, shelves lined with decaying books. Everything was coated in a fine layer of ash. "Andrew, this place," Tasha murmured. "It looks untouched." He nodded slowly. Like time froze. He reached for the desk, brushing off the surface. Underneath the dust was a photograph, a young woman with dark hair, holding a small violin. She was smiling. "My sister," he said softly. Before Tasha could reply, her flashlight flickered. Once, twice, then steadied on something scratched into the wall. She moved closer, heart racing. It was a message carved into the plaster, uneven and desperate. "Don't let him in." Tasha's breath hitched. "Andrew," she wrote this. He turned, confusion mixing with dread. "Who's him?" Before either could speak, a deep creaking came from above them. Footsteps in the attic, slow and deliberate. Tasha's heart slammed against her ribs. "Someone's up there." Andrew stared toward the ceiling. "That's impossible. This house doesn't even have an attic." Then came a whisper, soft but close, too close. "Andrew?" It was right behind them. They spun around. The door they had entered through was now closed. And this time there was no handle on the inside. Tasha's breathing quickened. "We're trapped," she cried, pounding on the wooden frame. Andrew rushed to help, but the door didn't budge. It was as if it had sealed itself shut. The air grew colder still. A faint melody began to drift through the darkness, a violin playing softly, mournful and slow. "Do you hear that?" Tasha whispered, voice trembling. Andrew nodded, eyes wide with disbelief. "That's her song. Eliza used to play that every night before." Before he could finish, the melody stopped. Then, 3 sharp knocks echoed from the other side of the wall. Knock, knock, knock. Each hit made the floor tremble. Dust fell from the ceiling. Andrew turned to Tasha, voice barely above a whisper. "We shouldn't have opened it." The lights flickered again, and just as they steadied, the outline of a figure appeared in the corner of the room. A woman. Long dark hair, face hidden by shadow. "Andrew," Tasha whispered, clutching his sleeve. "Tell me you see that." He nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. "Eliza." The figure tilted its head, and then with a sudden jolt, the light from Tasha's phone went out. Everything went black. In the suffocating dark, Tasha could hear Andrew's ragged breathing beside her, until suddenly it stopped. Then came his voice, faint and terrified. "Tasha. She's holding my hand." The pitch-black room swallowed every sound except their pounding hearts. Tasha's breath trembled as she reached for Andrew, her fingers brushing empty air. "Andrew?" she whispered. No reply. Just the creak of old wood beneath their feet and the faint sound of a woman humming, the same haunting melody from before. "Andrew," she cried again, louder this time. Her phone suddenly flickered back to life for a brief second, and in that flash of light she saw him, Andrew, standing completely still. His eyes were wide, staring at something in front of him. And his hand was outstretched, holding nothing. Or rather, holding someone invisible. The flashlight died again before she could see more. "Andrew, listen to me," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Whatever you're seeing, it's not real. We have to get out of here." But his voice came low, hollow, almost distant. "It is real, Tasha. I can feel her hand. It's cold, but it's her." Then came that whisper again, close enough to make the hair on the back of Tasha's neck rise. "Don't leave me again." The air turned icy. Tasha stumbled backward, fumbling for her phone. Her trembling fingers finally unlocked the flashlight, and the light burst through the dark, only to reveal something that froze her blood. Andrew was no longer standing alone. A woman stood behind him, pale as moonlight, her hair wet and tangled like she just crawled out of a lake. Her eyes, sunken but glowing faintly blue, locked directly on Tasha. And she was smiling. Tasha's scream caught in her throat. "Andrew, behind you." But when he turned, the figure vanished. He blinked, dazed as though waking from a dream. What happened? Tasha couldn't speak. She pointed toward the empty space where the ghostly woman had stood. She was right there. Andrew rubbed his temples. You saw her? I saw something, Tasha replied. And I think she wants us to see more. They searched the room again using their phones for light. Every inch of the walls was covered in faint scratches, like someone had been clawing to get out. On the far side of the room, beneath the window, was a small trunk. It was old, iron-bound, and half buried under layers of dust and cobwebs. Should we open it? Andrew asked. Tasha hesitated. After what just happened, you're seriously asking me that? But Andrew was already kneeling beside it. If she's trying to show us something, this could be the key. He pried it open. The hinges groaned in protest. Inside lay a stack of yellowed papers, a violin bow, and a small leather-bound diary. Tasha knelt beside him, wiping dust off the cover. It's hers. Andrew nodded. Eliza's journal. The first few pages were filled with messy handwriting, emotional outbursts, and ink blots. But one line near the end made both of them stop cold. He's changing. He's not my father anymore. Something's in him. It wants me to open the door. Tasha looked up, eyes wide. She wasn't talking about your dad, was she? Andrew swallowed hard. I don't know. But whatever it was, she was scared. They kept reading. More entries described sleepless nights, whispers through the walls, and her father's growing obsession with keeping it contained. The final page read only one line. If I don't make it, don't let him out. The sound of a slow knock startled them both. Knock, knock, knock. This time it came from the floor. Tasha's eyes darted down. The floorboards beneath the trunk shifted slightly, like something underneath was trying to move. Andrew, she whispered. Something's down there. They pushed the trunk aside and found a loose plank. Andrew pried it up carefully, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside was a wooden box, smaller than a shoebox, bound with black tape. Tasha's heart raced. Don't open it. Andrew hesitated, the box in his hands. It could explain everything. Or make it worse, she said firmly. But before either could decide, the lights flickered again. The air filled with that soft humming, Eliza's song, and the box shook violently in Andrew's grip. He dropped it. The lid popped open. A gust of cold air burst out, carrying a faint scream that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The walls shuddered. Books toppled off shelves. The carved message, "Don't let him in," began to glow faintly red. What did you do? Tasha shouted over the rising wind. Andrew stumbled back, terrified. I didn't mean to. A dark mist poured from the box, swirling upward like smoke. It gathered in the corner of the room, twisting, forming a shape, tall, broad, inhuman. Tasha's flashlight dimmed as the mist solidified into something with eyes. It wasn't Eliza. It was a man's shadow, hulking, faceless, its voice deep and cruel. Finally, it whispered, "Free." Tasha froze, realization hitting her like a blow. That's who she meant. Him. Andrew backed away in horror. That thing, that's what took her. The shadow laughed, low and menacing. You shouldn't have opened the door, Andrew. The lights exploded. Everything went black again. Tasha screamed as something cold brushed her arm. Then silence. Only one voice broke it. Soft, mournful. Don't let him take you too. It was Eliza. When the light flickered back, Tasha was alone. The room was empty. No Andrew, no shadow, no sound. Only the diary lay open on the floor, with fresh words written across the last page in shaky ink. He's inside. The silence that followed was unbearable. No hum. No wind. No Andrew. Tasha stood frozen in the center of the room, her flashlight trembling in her grip, the beam shaking across the cracked wallpaper and dusty shelves. Andrew? She whispered, her voice barely a breath. Nothing. Just the faint rustle of papers from the desk and the quiet ticking of her wristwatch, proof that time hadn't completely stopped, even if everything else had. Her eyes darted to the floor where Andrew had been standing seconds ago. His footprints were still visible in the thin layer of dust, clear and deep, but they ended abruptly, like he had simply ceased to exist. The diary on the floor fluttered open again, pages flipping wildly as if caught in an unseen breeze. Tasha knelt down cautiously, her heart racing. The final page still glowed faintly, the ink shimmering like wet paint. Fresh words began to appear across the page, right before her eyes. You can't save him. He belongs to the house now. She staggered backward, knocking into the wall. No, this can't be happening. Her flashlight flickered, and for a brief second she thought she saw movement behind her, a faint outline in the mirror that hung crooked on the opposite wall. A man's reflection. Andrew's. But when she turned around, the room was empty again. Tasha's instincts screamed to get out. She bolted for the door, pulling hard, but it didn't move. The handle was still gone, the wood cold beneath her fingers. She banged on it with both hands, shouting, "Somebody help me!" Her voice echoed through the house, but there was no response. No neighbors. No passing cars. No city sounds. It was as if the house existed in a different world now, somewhere cut off from everything beyond its walls. Then came a new sound. A dragging noise. Slow. Heavy. Coming from the corner of the room where the shadow had formed earlier. Tasha spun around, her light barely holding steady. Who's there? The sound stopped. Then 3 low knocks came from inside the wall. Not from the door this time. From the wall. She pressed her ear against the plaster, breath uneven. A faint voice whispered through it, muffled and desperate. Help me. Tasha's heart leapt. Andrew? The whisper came again, weaker this time. It's cold he's here. Where are you? She pleaded. Tell me where. The voice shuddered. Behind the mirror. She turned toward the dusty mirror that hung half loose on the wall. The reflection looked wrong, slightly distorted, like water rippling over glass. Her trembling hand reached out and touched it. It was warm. Then the glass quivered under her fingertips, like something was moving behind it. Andrew? She whispered again. No answer, just the faint echo of her own voice. She gritted her teeth and yanked the mirror off the wall. It fell and shattered across the floor, revealing a hidden cavity behind it, an old bricked-up space with faint light bleeding through cracks. And inside that hollow she saw it. A shape, slumped over, motionless. It was Andrew. Andrew, she cried, clawing at the loose bricks with her hands. The mortar was brittle, crumbling easily as she pulled the pieces away. Within seconds she managed to pry open a hole big enough to reach in. His skin was ice cold, his face pale, but his chest rose and fell. He was alive. Wake up, she begged, shaking him. Andrew, please wake up. His eyes snapped open, but they weren't the same. They were pitch black. Before she could react, his hand shot up and clamped around her wrist. His grip was vice-like, inhumanly strong. Andrew, stop. You're hurting me. His head tilted slightly, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold, unfamiliar smile. When he spoke, his voice was deeper, layered, like 2 people speaking at once. You should have left. Tasha's blood ran cold. You're not Andrew. The shadow's voice echoed through him. He opened the box. He freed me. Now he's mine. She struggled to pull away, her heart hammering. What do you want from us? The thing inside Andrew leaned closer, its smile widening. I want what your voice gave me, life. Her eyes widened in terror. My voice. It nodded slowly. You called to me when you screamed. You let me in. The air around them thickened, the temperature plummeting. Frost began to form on the walls. Let him go, she cried, clawing at his arm. You can take me instead, just let him go. The creature laughed, a deep, hollow sound that shook the room. You think it's a choice? The light from her phone flickered again, brighter this time, and for a brief second she saw Andrew's real face fighting through, the pain in his eyes, the struggle behind the darkness. "Tasha," he croaked. "Don't let him win." The shadow's form rippled violently, as if Andrew's resistance was tearing it apart. Tasha seized the chance. She grabbed the diary off the floor and flipped to the glowing page. The carved message on the wall, "Don't let him in," began to pulse with light. She shouted, reading the final line aloud. "He cannot stay where love remains unbroken." A piercing scream erupted from Andrew's body. The light flared, blinding and white-hot. Then silence. When Tasha opened her eyes, Andrew was on the floor, unconscious but breathing. The air was still again. The mist was gone. She exhaled shakily, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's over," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "It's finally over." But as she reached to close the diary, she froze. The ink was still wet, and new words were appearing, slowly, one by one. "You can't end what you didn't start." "He's awake now." A chill ran through her veins. She turned toward the door. It was open again, and from the dark hallway beyond came the faint sound of a violin playing that same haunting tune, soft, sorrowful, and endless. Tasha turned back to Andrew's body, only to realize his eyes were open again. And this time he was smiling. For several long seconds, Tasha couldn't move. The air around her felt heavy, charged, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Andrew lay on the floor, eyes open, a slow smile creeping across his face. At first, she wanted to believe he was awake, that the nightmare was finally over. But then, his lips twitched in a way that wasn't human. The smile stretched too far, too steady, too wrong. "Andrew," she whispered, her voice breaking. He blinked once, then twice. "Tasha," he said softly. But it wasn't his voice. It was calm, hollow, deliberate. "You did well." She took a step back. "You're scaring me." He sat up slowly, movements jerky, as though his body didn't quite belong to him. The shadows around the corners of the room seemed to pulse with each breath he took. "You freed me," he continued. "After all this time." She felt her throat tighten. "You're not Andrew." That cold grin widened. "He's still here. Watching. Listening. But he's not in control anymore." The voice that spoke through him sent chills down her spine, deep, layered, vibrating with something ancient. "Who are you?" she demanded, forcing the words out. It tilted his head, amused. "Names lose meaning after a century. But once they called me the Collector." Tasha's stomach dropped. "The Collector?" "Yes," it said simply. "The one who gathers what others abandon. Fear, pain, regret, souls." Her heart raced. "You can't stay here. Whatever you are, you're going back where you came from." The entity laughed softly, a low rumble that made the walls shiver. "You think this house is mine?" "No, Tasha, this world is." He stood up, slow and towering. The overhead light flickered and dimmed until the only glow came from the open diary on the floor, the words inside burning faintly red. "Do you know why your voice called to me?" the creature asked. Tasha shook her head, backing away. "I didn't call you." "Oh, but you did," it whispered. "When you screamed. When you felt. Emotion feeds the veil between us. And you, dear Tasha, feel everything." Her breath hitched. "You're lying." "Am I?" it asked, taking a step closer. "You were the one who felt her pain, who heard her song, who opened the door." She froze. He was right. Every piece of this nightmare had begun when she stepped into that house. "Why me?" she demanded. "Why not him?" "Because Andrew's blood binds the curse," the creature replied. "But yours, your compassion, unlocked it. You cared enough to listen." Tasha's vision blurred with tears. "I was just trying to help." The thing in Andrew's body smiled again. "And that's exactly why you're perfect." Suddenly, Andrew's hand shot forward and grabbed her arm. The cold rushed through her veins instantly, like ice spreading beneath her skin. She screamed and tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. The shadow behind him began to ripple and stretch, rising up the walls like smoke. I can't hold him much longer. Andrew's real voice broke through for a second, weak and trembling. Run, please, run. Tasha hesitated, torn between fear and the need to save him. But then the shadow lunged, a black mist surging from his body straight toward her face. She screamed, stumbling backward into the hallway. Her flashlight fell and shattered, plunging everything into near darkness except for the faint light bleeding from the cursed room behind her. Get out, Andrew's voice echoed faintly, half human, half demon. Before he takes you too. Tasha bolted down the hallway. The house seemed to twist around her, the walls elongating, the doors shifting positions. Every step felt like moving through fog and fire at once. Behind her, she could hear the slow, deliberate footsteps of the creature. No running. No chasing. Just walking, confident that she couldn't escape. Tasha, the voice cooed. Why run from what you set free? She stumbled into the living room and slammed the door shut, pushing a chair under the handle. Her chest heaved with every breath. Then she saw movement in the mirror above the fireplace. Andrew, or what was left of him, was standing in the reflection. But when she turned, he wasn't there. The reflection grinned. You can't trap a shadow, it whispered through the glass. The mirror cracked, a web of fractures spreading from the center outward like ice on a frozen lake. Then silence. Tasha pressed herself against the far wall, shaking. The diary still glowed faintly through the open doorway of the hall. Its pages were fluttering again, turning on their own. She crept forward cautiously. The words on the newest page read, "There's one way to end it. But it will cost you everything." Her voice quivered. What does that mean? The air stirred, a whisper from nowhere and everywhere. Eliza's violin, the voice said faintly. Find it. Tasha spun around. Eliza. But there was no one there, only that faint scent of roses and ash. She turned back to the diary, whispering to herself, the violin, where is it? A faint sound answered her, the same haunting melody from before, echoing from upstairs. She knew it was a trap, but she also knew it was her only chance. Slowly she climbed the creaking staircase, each step protesting under her weight. The melody grew louder, clearer. It led her to the far end of the corridor, a small attic door she hadn't noticed before. The violin stopped. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Tasha reached for the handle. Her hand shook, and just as she turned it, a voice behind her whispered, calm and close, "You shouldn't have followed the music." Tasha spun around, but there was no one there. Only a faint trail of black smoke curling under the attic door, and a whisper that sounded like Andrew's voice saying her name. Tasha stood frozen at the top of the stairs, her hand trembling on the attic doorknob. The whisper still echoed faintly behind her, Andrew's voice, distant and strained, like it was being pulled through a tunnel of static. The house had gone eerily still again. No more music. No more footsteps. Just the faint creaking of the old wooden floorboards beneath her feet. She swallowed hard. Her flashlight was gone, so the only light came from the faint moonbeams slicing through the cracked hallway window. Dust floated in the air like drifting spirits. Her mind screamed at her to leave, to run. But something deeper, something that felt like fate, urged her to open that door. She took a breath, turned the knob, and pushed. The attic door opened with a long, aching groan. At first, all she could see was darkness. Then, slowly as her eyes adjusted, faint shapes began to appear. Old furniture covered in sheets, broken picture frames, boxes stacked haphazardly. And there, in the center of the room, stood a violin resting on a stool. Its wood was dark, almost black, and one of the strings hung loose, swaying gently in the draft. Tasha stepped inside. The air felt heavy, thicker here, filled with something she couldn't name. Each breath tasted of dust and old secrets. "Is this it?" she whispered. As if in response, the violin string plucked itself, a single sharp note slicing through the silence. She jumped back. Then the attic door slammed shut behind her. Her heart lurched. She rushed to it, grabbing the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Lock. Andrew," she shouted. "Andrew, please?" No answer. Only the sound of the violin, slow, haunting, playing itself now. Tasha turned back toward the stool. The violin had shifted slightly, facing her now. She didn't know how it was possible, but the instrument seemed alive. Its bow floated just above the strings, moving on its own. As the eerie melody filled the room, she noticed something forming in the shadows. A faint outline of a woman in an old dress, her hair cascading over her shoulders. "Eliza," Tasha whispered. The ghostly figure looked up. Her eyes glowed faintly blue, soft but filled with pain. "You shouldn't have come here," Eliza said quietly. Her voice echoed like a faint wind. Tasha took a cautious step forward. "I didn't want to, but you called me. You've been trying to tell us something." Eliza's head tilted. "You open the door. That means you can end it." Tasha's heart pounded. "End what?" "The curse," Eliza said. "But he's stronger now. The collector feeds on fear, on the pain that lives in this house." Tasha clenched her fists. "Then tell me how to stop him." Eliza's eyes flickered toward the violin. "The music that bound him can unbind him. But the song must be finished, and the one who plays it must give their life." Tasha froze. "No. There has to be another way." Eliza's figure flickered, her voice softening. "I tried. I played it halfway before he took me. That's why I'm trapped. The song must end tonight, or he will take another." A sudden cold gust of air swept through the attic. The shadows thickened, twisting and curling like smoke. From behind Tasha came a voice, deeper this time, colder, dripping with satisfaction. "Ah," it said. "You found my song." She turned slowly. The collector stood at the edge of the room, still wearing Andrew's face, but distorted, eyes black, veins crawling across his skin. He smiled. "Thank you for finishing what she started." "Let him go," Tasha said firmly, trying to keep her voice steady. "He's done nothing to you." The collector stepped closer. "You think this is about him?" "No. This is about balance. The living and the dead, the guilty and the innocent. For every door that opens." He raised his hand. "Something must come through." Tasha's body tensed. "You said I set you free. Why are you still here?" His smile widened. "Freedom is only fun when you have company." Then, before she could react, the collector extended his hand toward the violin. The bow lifted, hovering midair. "Let's finish the song," he whispered. The violin began to play violently now, strings screaming, notes spiraling into chaos. The room shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Eliza's spirit screamed, clutching her chest. "He's feeding, stop him." Tasha covered her ears, but the sound vibrated in her bones. She looked at the violin, at the empty stool, and realized what she had to do. "No," she whispered. "You're not taking anyone else." She lunged forward, grabbing the violin before the collector could react. The moment her fingers touched it, a blinding surge of energy tore through her. Her vision filled with flashes, Eliza playing in the same attic decades ago, crying as she fought the curse, Andrew's ancestors sealing the door, and the dark presence that had waited patiently for a century to return. Then she was back. The collector roared in fury. "You fool! You can't control it." Tasha lifted the violin bow. "Maybe not," she said through clenched teeth. "But I can finish what she started." The first note she played split the air like thunder. The second one burned her fingertips. The third sent the collector stumbling backward, howling in pain. Eliza's ghost appeared beside her, her voice trembling. "Keep going." Tasha played faster, the melody pouring through her, sorrow, loss, and defiance blending into one desperate song. The attic glowed with golden light as the shadows screamed and recoiled. "You can't win," the collector bellowed, his form flickering violently. "Watch me," she whispered. She struck the final note. The explosion of light blinded her. Every window shattered outward. The house groaned like it was breathing for the first time in decades. And then silence. When Tasha opened her eyes, she was lying on the attic floor. The violin was gone. So was the collector. Eliza stood nearby, smiling faintly, her form already fading. "You did it," she whispered. Tasha sat up weakly. "Andrew, where is he?" Eliza's eyes softened. "He's free now. And so am I." Her form dissolved into mist, leaving behind a faint echo of music that faded into nothing. Tasha pushed herself to her feet, dizzy but alive. The attic was still again, no shadows, no whispers. Only silence and the faint warmth of dawn creeping through the cracks. She reached for the attic door, and this time it opened easily. As she stepped into the hallway, she heard faint footsteps downstairs. Andrew's voice, real this time, calling softly. "Tasha? Is it over?" She smiled weakly through tears. "Yeah," she whispered. "It's over." But as she looked back one last time, she noticed something. The mirror on the attic wall, the one cracked during the chaos, now showed a reflection of someone standing behind her. A faint smile, and two black eyes staring back. Tasha froze, staring at the reflection. The collector was gone, but the smile in the mirror whispered otherwise. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains as Tasha sat at the edge of the bed, still in the clothes from the night before. She hadn't slept a wink. Not after what she saw in that attic mirror. Her reflection had smiled back at her, but it wasn't her. The eyes were wrong. Too dark, too deep, too knowing. She had turned instantly, searching behind her, but no one was there. The mirror, however, still pulsed faintly, like it was breathing. Now, hours later, the house felt too quiet again. The air still thick with the scent of dust and faint burnt wood. Downstairs, Andrew brewed coffee. The normalcy of it all felt surreal, almost offensive after the night they just survived. He handed her a cup with trembling hands. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, forcing a shaky laugh. Tasha met his eyes. "I think I did." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I can't believe any of that happened. The violin, the light, the voice, it's like a nightmare." She didn't answer. Her eyes drifted toward the staircase that led to the attic. The door at the top was shut again, but she couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't over. "Andrew," she began carefully, "when your grandmother sold this place, did she ever say why?" He frowned. "She said it was too much to handle after my grandfather died." "Why?" Tasha hesitated. "Because I think she knew about it." "About him?" Andrew blinked. "The collector?" She nodded. "He didn't just show up randomly. Someone kept him here, trapped. That door wasn't a barrier for him. It was a prison." Andrew stared at her, disbelief clouding his face. "Tasha, we destroyed the violin. The curse should be gone." "Should be," she said softly, "but it's not." He followed her gaze to the mirror hanging on the hallway wall. The same one she'd seen upstairs, though this one was smaller, less ornate. Yet something about it felt wrong. The reflection looked slightly off. A few seconds delayed. Andrew stepped closer. "It's just an old mirror. My grandma said it came with the house." Tasha felt her stomach twist. "Then it's part of it." "He's not gone, Andrew," he moved. Andrew's laugh was hollow. "You think he's in the mirror?" "Not think," she said, eyes narrowing. "I know." That evening, when the sun dipped below the treeline, the temperature in the house dropped again. They were in the living room when it started, a faint tapping sound, rhythmic and steady. Tap, tap, tap. Andrew turned toward the hallway. "You hear that?" Tasha nodded slowly. "It's coming from the mirror." They approached cautiously, hearts pounding. The tapping grew louder, faster, desperate. Then it stopped. Andrew exhaled shakily. "Maybe it's just the wind." But before he could turn away, a pale hand slammed against the inside of the mirror. They both jumped back. The glass rippled like water, and behind it they could see something moving. A face pressing close, lips twisted in a grin. Tasha's breath caught. Oh no. The voice that came from the mirror was a whisper at first, then grew distorted and layered. You finished the song, it hissed. But you left the door open. The lights flickered violently. The TV turned on by itself, showing static. Andrew grabbed Tasha's hand. We need to get out. Now. They bolted for the door, but it slammed shut before they reached it. Tasha tried the handle, but it wouldn't move. The same cold presence she felt in the attic now filled the room again, wrapping around her chest like invisible chains. Andrew shouted, "What do you want from us?" The voice laughed, a low, broken sound. "I want what I was promised," it said. "Balance." Tasha turned toward the mirror. "You can't have him." "Oh, but I already do," the voice replied. She froze. "What do you mean?" The reflection in the mirror changed. Andrew's face appeared, but his reflection wasn't moving in sync anymore. It smiled when he didn't. Its eyes darkened. Tasha's heart stopped. "Andrew?" He looked at her, confused. "What?" The reflection's hand pressed against the inside of the glass, and Andrew suddenly clutched his chest, gasping in pain. "Tasha, help me." She reached for him, but the moment she touched him, her hand burned like she'd grabbed live fire. She yanked it back, trembling. The collector's laughter filled the room again. "You broke my chain," he hissed. "Now I wear another." Tasha stared in horror. "You're using him as a vessel." The reflection nodded. He opened the door. He became the door. Tasha shook her head. "I'll find a way to stop you. I don't care how." The mirror rippled again, and the collector's face emerged fully, staring straight at her through Andrew's features. "Then come find me," he whispered. The glass shattered, exploding outward. Tasha screamed, shielding her face as shards flew through the air. When she opened her eyes again, Andrew was gone. Only the broken frame remained, and a faint echo of laughter fading into silence. Hours later, police lights flashed outside the old mansion. Officers combed the property, but there was no sign of Andrew anywhere. No footprints, no open doors, no trace. Tasha sat on the front steps, a blanket around her shoulders, staring blankly into the distance. An officer crouched beside her. "Ma'am, we'll keep searching, but there's no evidence of anyone else in the house. Are you sure he didn't just leave?" She turned slowly toward him, her voice trembling. "He didn't leave. He was taken." The officer frowned. "Taken? By who?" Tasha looked toward the attic window, where a faint flicker of light danced behind the curtain, soft, golden, like candlelight. "By the house," she said quietly. "By what's inside." That night, as the police left and the house fell silent again, Tasha returned to her car. She started the engine but hesitated before driving off. Something compelled her to glance in the rearview mirror. At first, she saw only her tired face, her eyes rimmed with tears. Then, faintly, just for a second, she saw Andrew's reflection sitting in the back seat, smiling softly. "Don't open that door," he whispered. The car's headlights flickered. The engine died. And in the distance, from the direction of the house, came the faint sound of a violin playing once more. Tasha sat frozen, the echo of the music growing louder through the night air. She turned toward the mansion, and the front door slowly began to open on its own. The night air felt colder than usual as Tasha stepped out of her car, the faint melody from the mansion drifting across the empty driveway. The tune was soft, familiar, that same haunting lullaby Eliza had played decades ago. But this time it wasn't coming from the attic. It was coming from downstairs. The house stood like a shadowed giant against the moonlight, its broken windows reflecting slivers of silver light. Every instinct in her screamed to drive away, to never look back. But the sound, that melody, pulled her forward like an invisible thread. Andrew was still in there. She could feel it. She clutched the pendant Eliza's ghost had left behind, a small, tarnished key on a silver chain, and whispered to herself, "You're not taking him from me." Then she pushed the front door open. The house greeted her with silence, broken only by the faint groan of the old floorboards beneath her feet. The air was dense, heavy, as if the walls were holding their breath. She took one step, then another. The lights flickered weakly, revealing traces of movement, like shadows shifting just beyond her vision. Her phone's flashlight barely pierced the gloom. Dust floated in thick spirals. The smell of damp wood and faint smoke lingered. And beneath it all, the violin's song continued, echoing softly down the hallway. She followed the sound through the living room, past the shattered mirror frame. Then she saw it. The violin sat neatly on the floor, perfectly centered on the old rug, its wood gleaming under the flashlight. But it was different now. The body of the instrument pulsed faintly, as though it had veins beneath the varnish. Tasha crouched down slowly. "Andrew?" she whispered. The music stopped. Then, faintly from somewhere deeper in the house, a man's voice answered. "Tasha." Her heart leapt. "Andrew, where are you?" "Basement?" His voice cracked. "Don't come down here." But she was already running. The door to the basement was half open, the darkness beyond it thick as ink. She hesitated at the top of the stairs, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "Andrew?" No answer this time. Only a faint whisper, like the wind calling her name. She descended slowly, one creaking step at a time. The air grew colder with every step, until her breath began to fog in front of her. Halfway down, her light flickered, once, twice, and then went out. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She smacked the phone, whispering frantically, "Come on, come on." When it came back on, she froze. Andrew was standing at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at her. "Tasha," he said, his voice calm, steady. "You shouldn't be here." She almost cried with relief. "Oh my God," I thought. But then she stopped. Something was wrong. His eyes, they were black, empty, and his smile was too wide. "Andrew?" she whispered. He tilted his head. "You shouldn't have come back." The basement door slammed shut behind her. The light flickered again, and now the basement wasn't empty anymore. The walls were covered in old newspaper clippings, family portraits, and pages of sheet music, all of them nailed, taped, or glued to the concrete like a shrine. Each clipping had the same headline written in bold, faded letters. "Local family missing, door found sealed from inside." Tasha's breath came in ragged gasps. "What did you do, Andrew?" He stepped closer, shadows rippling around his feet. "It wasn't me. It was him. He showed me what happened here. He showed me you." She backed away. "You're not Andrew." He smiled, that same smile from the mirror. "Maybe not. But he's still in here. Would you like to talk to him?" His voice deepened, warped, two tones overlapping. "Because he's screaming for you right now." The floor began to shake, dust falling from the ceiling. The violin upstairs started playing again, louder, faster, the notes twisting into something chaotic. Tasha clutched her pendant and shouted, "You can't have him. You can't take another." The collector's voice echoed around her, deep and layered. "You open the door, Tasha. The moment you touched that violin, you became the bridge." She fell to her knees as the air thickened, pressing down on her chest. The room seemed to breathe, the walls expanding and contracting like lungs. The newspaper clippings started to peel off the wall, fluttering in the air like dying moths. Words on them rearranged themselves, forming a single sentence. "The one who plays stays." Tasha's hand shook as she lifted the key pendant. "If I open the door, then I can close it." The collector laughed softly. "Oh, you'll close it? But doors close from the inside." Suddenly, the pendant in her hand grew warm, then hot. She looked down and saw a faint glow pulsing through it, matching the rhythm of the music upstairs. It wasn't just a pendant. It was a key, and it was calling to the violin. The collector stopped moving. His eyes flicked toward it, for the first time showing something like fear. Tasha gripped the key tighter. "You're scared of this, aren't you?" he growled. "You don't understand what you're holding." "I don't have to." She ran for the stairs. The walls screamed as she climbed, a chorus of voices, some human, some not. Hands reached from the shadows, grasping at her legs, but she tore free, racing toward the living room. The violin's melody grew frantic, desperate. She burst through the door and saw the instrument levitating in midair, strings glowing red. Without hesitating, she jammed the key into the violin's hollow body. The entire house shuddered violently. The collector's voice bellowed from below. "Stop. You'll trap us both." "Good," Tasha yelled back. She twisted the key. A blinding light filled the room, brighter than before, raw and pure. The floor split, revealing flashes of faces. Eliza, Andrew, and others she didn't recognize, all reaching toward her. For a brief moment she saw Andrew clearly, his face free of shadow. "Tasha," he whispered, smiling faintly, "thank you." Then he was gone. When the light faded, the house was silent. Tasha stood in the middle of the living room, trembling, the key and violin both gone. The air felt lighter, cleaner somehow. She turned slowly toward the window. The first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. She exhaled a shaky breath. It's done. But as she stepped toward the door, she froze. The reflection in the broken mirror across the room showed her, but she wasn't alone. Behind her, a faint shadow stood smiling. Then it whispered softly like a promise. "This house still breathes." Tasha turned, heart racing, but the room was empty. Only the echo of that whisper lingered, carried by the morning wind. The night was unnaturally still, the kind of silence that weighed heavy in the air, pressing down like a storm waiting to break. The house felt colder than usual, though every window was closed. The distant hum of city life that usually drifted through the walls was gone, almost as if the world outside had vanished, leaving only the darkness. Ava sat on the living room couch, her knees drawn close to her chest. She hadn't told anyone about the woman she saw standing by the woods earlier that day, the same one who'd appeared in her dreams for weeks. She thought maybe she was imagining things. But then, around midnight, she heard it again, the creak of floorboards upstairs. Her heart raced. She wasn't alone. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. Silence. Then, a soft thump. Another. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving across the hallway above her. Ava grabbed her phone, but the screen refused to light up. The battery was full an hour ago. Now it was completely dead. She stood up, forcing herself toward the staircase, every instinct screaming for her to run the other way. But something about the footsteps, measured and familiar, pulled her closer. Halfway up the stairs she froze. A faint humming drifted through the air. It was the same lullaby her mother used to sing, the one she hadn't heard since she was a child. Her throat tightened. "Mom?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes. No answer. The melody stopped suddenly, replaced by a faint tapping sound, 3 knocks on a door. Not the front one. The door to the basement. She backed away, shaking her head. The basement was where her father used to keep the old security footage, files, and things from before the accident. It had been locked for years. Then the knocks came again. 3 short, sharp raps. She turned toward the sound, her pulse thundering. The house felt alive now, like it was breathing with her fear. "Ava?" A familiar male voice called out from behind her. She spun around. It was Daniel. His hair was messy, his expression tired but concerned. "What are you doing up?" "There's someone in the basement," she whispered. "I heard knocking." Daniel frowned. "That's impossible. The basement door's sealed." Before she could argue, another set of knocks echoed, this time louder. They both turned toward the hallway where the old wooden door stood slightly ajar. The padlock that had once kept it shut now hung broken on the floor. Daniel grabbed a flashlight from the counter. "Stay behind me." The beam of light cut through the darkness as they approached the basement door. The air smelled musty, thick with dust and something faintly metallic. Daniel reached for the handle. Ava's hand shot out. "Don't open that door," she whispered. He paused, looking at her. Ava, it's probably just the wind or... Daniel, please, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Every time something strange happens, it's connected to that room. He hesitated, the tension in the air stretching like a live wire. Then another sound drifted up, this time a faint whimper. A child's voice. Help me. Ava's breath hitched. Daniel's face went pale. That's... he stammered, his voice barely audible. That's not possible. He swung the flashlight toward the dark gap beneath the door. A shadow moved, small, fast, human. Who's down there? He demanded. No response. Just silence. Daniel took a step closer, his jaw tightening. But Ava grabbed his arm again. Please, Daniel. Don't. You don't understand. Something slammed against the other side of the door, hard enough to rattle the frame. Ava screamed and stumbled backward. Daniel steadied her, his heart racing. Okay, he said, forcing calm into his voice. We'll call the police. But when he reached for his phone, the screen flickered, then went black, just like Ava's. The house lights dimmed, one by one, until only the flashlight remained. And then, from the basement, came a whisper that made Ava's blood run cold. Daniel, I know what you did. He froze, color draining from his face. Ava turned to him wide-eyed. Daniel, what does that mean? He didn't answer. He couldn't. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, she saw real fear in his eyes. Not the kind you get from a strange sound in the dark, but the kind that comes from being found out. Ava's mind raced. What did he do? The knocks started again, this time from every wall around them, echoing through the house. Daniel dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, casting wild, flickering shadows up the staircase. And in that flicker of light, Ava saw it. A hand, thin, pale, and trembling, reaching from the gap beneath the basement door. She screamed. Daniel lunged forward, slamming the door shut again, pressing his back against it. Go upstairs, he yelled. But Ava didn't move. Her voice shook. Daniel, whose voice was that? His breathing came in ragged gasps. It's not possible, he muttered to himself. I buried the truth years ago. Ava stepped closer, fear giving way to confusion. What truth? Before he could answer, the sound of shattering glass exploded from the kitchen. Both of them turned as cold air swept through the hallway. The door behind Daniel creaked open again, slowly against his weight. Ava's scream echoed through the house. And just as Daniel turned to push it shut, a voice whispered one last time, this time right in his ear. You should have listened to her. The air was thick with dread. Every breath Ava took felt like inhaling ice. The door to the basement stood slightly open now, swaying on its hinges as though something unseen had brushed past it. Daniel's hand trembled against the frame, his knuckles white, his body frozen in place. Ava stepped back, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Daniel, we need to leave, she whispered, clutching her chest. Something's wrong with this house. Something's not right. Daniel didn't respond immediately. His eyes were locked on the crack in the door, where the pale hand had reached out moments earlier. His lips moved silently as if reciting a prayer, or a memory he'd buried too deep. Daniel? Ava's voice shook. What did you mean, I buried the truth? What's happening? He blinked as if waking from a trance. It's complicated. Ava felt a wave of panic rise. Complicated? Daniel, a voice just called your name from a basement that's been locked for years. Before he could reply, a floorboard creaked overhead. The flashlight beam flickered across the ceiling. They weren't alone. Daniel straightened, forcing himself to breathe. Stay here, he said, his voice low. I'll check upstairs. But Ava grabbed his arm, shaking her head fiercely. You're not leaving me alone again. They moved together toward the staircase, the air colder with every step. The hallway above glowed faintly from a single lamp that flickered like a dying star. Dust floated in the light, slow, spiraling, like the house itself was exhaling ghosts. Then a sound stopped them both. A faint humming. It was the same lullaby from before. The same haunting tune Ava's mother used to sing. But this time it was coming from the upstairs guest room. Daniel's jaw tightened. That room's been sealed since. He stopped himself. Since what? Ava demanded. He didn't answer. Instead he reached for the doorknob. The handle turned easily, though he hadn't unlocked it. The room was dimly lit, filled with old boxes, covered furniture, and dust-coated frames. But one thing stood out, the rocking chair in the corner. It moved slowly back and forth, creaking with every sway. And on it sat a small porcelain music box. Its lid was open, playing the same lullaby. Ava's knees nearly buckled. That's my mother's. Daniel's face turned ashen. I know. She turned to him, confusion written across her face. How do you know that? He stepped closer to the rocking chair, his voice trembling. Because I was there the night she disappeared. The world seemed to stop spinning. What did you just say? Daniel rubbed his face, pacing the room. Ava, listen, back then your mother worked for my father. She was his personal assistant. She used to bring you to the office sometimes, remember? Ava's voice barely rose above a whisper. I remember the office. The big glass building in Seattle. Daniel nodded. My father was a powerful man, but not a kind one. He was involved in things he shouldn't have been. Illegal experiments, cover-ups, hush money, the kind of things that ruin lives if they ever get out. Ava's pulse raced. And my mother? She found out, he said flatly. She was going to expose him. She came to the house one night to confront him. I was 15. I heard them fighting in the basement. His voice faltered. Then there was a gunshot. Ava's hand flew to her mouth. I ran downstairs, Daniel continued, his eyes distant. My father was standing there, shaking, holding the gun. Your mother was on the floor. He told me it was an accident, that she'd tried to attack him. I was terrified. Ava's tears streamed silently. He made me help bury the body, Daniel whispered, breaking down. We sealed the basement that night. He told me never to speak of it again. Ava's whole world shattered in an instant. The basement, the knocks, the whispers. It all made sense now. You killed her, she whispered, her voice trembling. No, Daniel cried, shaking his head violently. I didn't pull the trigger, Ava. I swear. But I helped cover it up. I was too scared to tell anyone. My father threatened to ruin your life too, to make it look like she abandoned you. Ava took a step back, her chest heaving. You let me grow up thinking my mother left me. I'm sorry, he said, collapsing to his knees. I thought it was the only way to protect you. The room seemed to grow darker around them. The air turned heavy. The music box began to play slower, warped, as if something invisible was touching it. Then a whisper drifted through the air, soft but unmistakable. Daniel? Ava's eyes went wide. The voice came from beneath the floorboards. Daniel turned pale. No, he muttered. No, 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 this can't be happening. The floor beneath the rocking chair began to creak and bend as if someone was pushing from below. The boards splintered with a loud crack. Ava stumbled back, screaming. And then, through the crack in the floor, a hand, pale, covered in dirt and dried blood, reached up, grasping the edge. Daniel's scream joined hers. He grabbed the music box and hurled it against the wall, shattering it. The lullaby stopped. But the hand didn't disappear. It kept reaching, fingers clawing toward him. Daniel? Ava screamed. What is that? He backed against the wall, trembling. She's not supposed to be here, he whispered. I buried her. My father made me. A sudden voice cut him off. It came from the hallway. Come. Familiar. You should have left the door closed. Ava turned toward the doorway, and her breath caught in her throat. Standing there, alive and very real, was Mr. Sterling, Daniel's father. Older now, gray-haired, but unmistakable. Daniel's voice cracked. Dad? You're supposed to be dead. Mr. Sterling smiled faintly. You really think I'd let a scandal kill me, son? Ava's mind reeled. You're alive? You faked your death? He stepped into the room, his voice dripping with calm malice. Of course. And you, Ava, were never supposed to come back here. You weren't supposed to remember. Ava backed away, tears streaming down her face. You murdered my mother. He shook his head. Murder? No. I preserved a secret. A truth too dangerous to be revealed. The floor groaned beneath him, the pale hand still clawing upward. Daniel's voice broke. Dad, please stop. She knows everything now. Mr. Sterling turned his icy gaze toward the floorboards. Then let her join her mother. He reached into his coat. The metallic glint of a gun caught the light. Ava screamed. But before he could fire, the floor beneath him split open entirely, collapsing with a deafening crack. Mr. Sterling plunged through the hole, his scream echoing into the darkness below. The house fell silent again. Ava and Daniel stood frozen, staring at the gaping hole in the floor. The faint hum of the lullaby returned, soft, mournful, echoing from the basement below. Daniel dropped to his knees, sobbing. It's over, it has to be over. But Ava shook her head slowly, her voice trembling. No, she whispered. It's just beginning. The silence that followed was unbearable, thick, tense, filled with the echo of what just happened. The hole in the floor yawned like an open grave, dust rising from its edges as the final echoes of Mr. Sterling's scream faded into the dark below. The house seemed to hold its breath. Ava stood still, her chest heaving, her mind struggling to process what she had just seen. Her body trembled uncontrollably, her tears blurring the edges of reality. The air felt heavier now, charged with something unnatural. Daniel was on his knees near the splintered boards, staring blankly into the void that had swallowed his father. He's gone, he whispered. He's actually gone. But Ava couldn't move closer. Something deep in her gut told her it wasn't over. The house wasn't finished with them. Then, faintly, a whisper rose from the hole, soft, almost pleading. Help me. Ava froze. The voice wasn't Mr. Sterling's. It was a woman's. Gentle. Familiar. Her breath caught in her throat. Mom? Daniel's head jerked up, his eyes wide. Ava, don't. But she was already moving. Her feet carried her toward the hole as if pulled by an invisible force. She dropped to her knees, peering into the darkness below. The flashlight still flickered weakly nearby, its beam cutting through the dust and illuminating what looked like a narrow tunnel beneath the floorboards, one that led toward the basement. Daniel grabbed her arm. Stop. We need to get out of here and call someone. This place isn't safe. She pulled free, tears streaming down her face. My mother's down there, Daniel. I can hear her. He shook his head frantically. No, that's not possible. I buried her myself. He stopped, guilt tightening his throat. At least, I thought I did. Ava looked him dead in the eyes. Then you're going to help me find out the truth. Without waiting, she grabbed the flashlight and swung her legs into the hole. Daniel hesitated, torn between fear and something deeper, remorse perhaps. Finally, he followed her down. The tunnel beneath the floor was cold, damp, and narrow. Wooden beams supported the walls, their edges rotting with age. The smell of earth and mildew filled their lungs. Every sound echoed, their breathing, the scrape of their shoes, the occasional drip of water from above. As they moved deeper, the whisper came again. Follow the light. Ava froze. Did you hear that? Daniel swallowed hard. Yes, but it's not coming from ahead. It's coming from everywhere. They pressed on, the narrow tunnel leading to a heavy steel door at the far end. It was rusted and sealed shut with bolts, but faint light glowed beneath it, pale, ghostly, like the shimmer of moonlight reflected through water. Daniel's hands trembled as he brushed the dust away from the door. This was my father's private lab in trance, he whispered. I thought he destroyed it years ago. Ava's heart raced. Then this is where we'll find the truth. Together they forced the bolts loose. The door creaked open, revealing a hidden chamber beneath the house. It looked like a laboratory, abandoned but not empty. Tables lined the walls, covered in old files, glass vials, and broken monitors. In the center of the room stood a large cylindrical tank filled with murky water. The hum of old generators echoed faintly through the space. Daniel stepped forward, shining the flashlight on the tank. "Oh my God," he whispered. Inside the tank was the faint outline of a woman, long hair floating gently in the water, eyes closed, face pale but peaceful. Ava's voice broke. "It's her? Her mother?" Daniel shook his head, disbelief painted across his face. "This can't be real. She's been dead for over a decade." Ava pressed her palm against the glass. "She's alive, Daniel. Look, her chest, it's moving." And it was, slowly, gently, as if she were asleep. Daniel stumbled backward, his mind reeling. "My father, he didn't kill her. He kept her." Ava's tears spilled freely now. What? Why would he do this? He turned toward the nearest desk, searching through the papers. Many were yellowed with age, but the handwriting was unmistakably Mr. Sterling's. His trembling fingers found a folder labeled Project Eden. He opened it, scanning quickly. The words made his stomach drop. Subject, Lucille Hart. Preservation experiment. Neural stasis procedure successful. Memory extraction incomplete. He looked up, horror dawning on his face. He didn't kill her, Ava. He used her. Ava's voice quivered. "What does that mean?" Daniel's hands shook as he read further. He was experimenting on consciousness, trying to trap human memory in a preserved body. He thought if he could control memory, he could erase guilt, rebuild people from scratch. Ava backed away from the tank, her heart breaking all over again. "He used my mother like a science project?" Daniel nodded slowly. "He didn't just preserve her, he was trying to copy her mind. The house, the whispers, the knocking, it's not her ghost, Ava. It's the fragments of her consciousness that he tried to store in the systems here." The realization hit her like a wave. "That's why the lights flicker," she whispered. "Why the voices come from everywhere. She's in the house." Daniel's voice cracked. "And she's trying to warn us." A sudden surge of electricity crackled through the room. The lights above flickered violently, and the monitors sparked to life. The same lullaby began playing again, distorted, echoing from every speaker. Ava turned toward the sound of static. On one of the monitors, a faint image began to form, a woman's face. Pale, trembling, her eyes filled with sorrow. It was Lucille Hart. "Ava," the voice rasped through the speakers. "You have to leave. He's not gone." Daniel froze. "She means my father." The entire room began to shake. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The tank's glass started to crack. Ava screamed. "We have to shut it down." Daniel lunged for the generator panel, flipping switches wildly, but the lights only grew brighter. A distorted voice, Mr. Sterling's, boomed through the speakers, mechanical and monstrous. "You can't stop what's already begun." The monitors flashed rapidly, showing images of Ava's childhood, her mother's smile, Daniel's youth, then lines of code. The words "Protocol Resurrection Initiated" blinked on the screen. Daniel's face turned ghost white. He uploaded himself. He breathed. He transferred his mind into the system. Ava's hands shook violently. "We have to destroy this place." Before he could answer, the tank shattered. Water poured across the floor, flooding the chamber. Lucille's body slumped forward into Ava's arms. Her skin cold but her eyes flickering open for just a moment. "Mom?" Ava whispered, tears falling onto her cheek. Lucille's lips trembled, her voice faint but clear. "Don't let him take you too." Her head fell forward, her body finally still. The monitors exploded in sparks. The air filled with the sound of Mr. Sterling's distorted laughter. Ava screamed, clinging to her mother as Daniel pulled her toward the tunnel. "We have to go. Now." Behind them, the lights turned blood red, alarms blaring as the walls began to collapse. And just before the door slammed shut, the last thing Ava heard wasn't the explosion or Daniel's voice. It was her father's voice, warped and echoing from the speakers. "I told you not to open that door." Smoke, dust, and splintered wood filled the air as Ava and Daniel stumbled through the collapsing tunnel. Every crash of falling debris sounded like the end of the world. Ava clutched the flashlight in one trembling hand and her mother's locket in the other, refusing to let go. Behind them, the red lights of the underground lab pulsed like a heartbeat, faster, angrier. Sparks shot from broken wires overhead as they ran. "Keep moving," Daniel shouted, his voice hoarse. "It's coming down." They crawled out into the basement just as a loud explosion rocked the floor beneath them. A blast of heat and dust surged up the stairs, throwing them against the wall. The house groaned, its beams snapping like bones. For a few seconds, everything went black. When Ava opened her eyes again, the world was quiet, too quiet. A single candle flickered in the corner, its flame bending in the drafts that swept through the shattered house. Daniel lay nearby, coughing weakly. His face was streaked with soot, but he was alive. "You okay?" Ava asked, crawling toward him. He nodded slowly, his voice cracked. "Yeah, barely." "You?" She swallowed hard. "My mom's gone, again." Her voice broke, and for a moment, Daniel didn't know what to say. Then the silence was broken by a low hum, a sound so faint and mechanical it almost blended into the wind. It came from the far wall where the basement control panel used to be. Ava frowned, wiping the dust from her eyes. "That sound, it's still running." Daniel's expression darkened. "That's impossible. The lab was destroyed." But the sound grew louder, an electronic pulse, steady and deliberate. The faint light of a monitor blinked through the haze. Ava's breath hitched. "No way." They moved closer. The old security screen that had been dead for years was glowing again. Words began to type themselves across the monitor, letter by letter. "Welcome back, Daniel." Daniel stepped back instinctively. No. He can't still be alive." Ava's eyes filled with dread. "You said he uploaded himself, right? Into the system?" He nodded slowly. "But if the servers weren't destroyed, he's still in there." The screen flickered again and the same deep voice echoed from the basement speakers, distorted, digital, and calm. "Did you really think fire could erase me, son?" Daniel froze, the color draining from his face. "Dad." Ava's hand flew to her mouth. The voice sounded stronger than before, almost human. "You were always weak, Daniel. Just like your mother. And you, Ava, so much like Lucille. Always digging where you shouldn't." Ava's pulse raced. "What do you want from us?" "I want what I started. I want perfection. You both are my failures, but together you're the key." The lights in the basement flickered again, forming strange shadows on the walls. One shadow, long and slender, began to move on its own. It crawled across the cracked cement floor toward them like a living thing. Ava screamed, stumbling back. "Daniel, what is that?" He stared in horror. "It's not a shadow. It's a projection. He's using the light to manipulate the system interface." The shadow rose, forming the vague outline of a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and faceless. Its digital edges shimmered like broken glass. "Run!" Daniel shouted. They bolted up the stairs, the floor trembling beneath their feet. Behind them, the distorted voice of Mr. Sterling echoed through every room, overlapping itself like a chorus of static. "You can't run from truth. You can't run from me." They burst through the front door and stumbled out into the freezing night air. The once grand mansion now looked like a haunted shell, windows shattered, smoke curling from its roof, every light flickering in eerie rhythm. Ava collapsed on the lawn, gasping for breath. Her entire body shook from exhaustion and grief. Daniel knelt beside her, scanning the house. It's still drawing power, he said, pointing toward the flickering windows. He's feeding off the backup generators. Ava looked up, her voice weak but firm. Then we cut it off for good. How? She turned toward the utility shed near the property line. You said the main power source connects underground. If we destroy the grid, he can't survive. Daniel hesitated. That'll cause a full system overload. The house could explode, she finished, meeting his gaze. Good. Without another word, they ran toward the shed. The cold air burned their lungs as they pushed through the tall grass, every sound amplified in the night. Their footsteps, the wind, and the faint static whisper that followed them. When they reached the shed, Daniel tore open the metal door. Inside, the power junction box buzzed with flickering red lights. A thick cable connected it to the house's underground line. Ava handed him the flashlight. Can you do it? He nodded, pulling out a wrench from the shelf. Yeah, but once it's done, there's no going back. Then do it. Daniel hesitated only a moment before twisting the main valve. Sparks erupted. The sound of humming power faltered, then died completely. For a brief second there was silence. Then the house screamed. The sound wasn't human. It was metal, wind, and electricity combined into a single deafening wail. The lights inside flared white, then red, before every window shattered outward in a blinding explosion of glass. Ava and Daniel hit the ground as debris rained around them. The mansion glowed from within, a pulsing red heartbeat, before finally, mercifully, going dark. For a long time neither of them spoke. The only sound was the crackle of dying embers and the faint whisper of the wind through the trees. Finally, Ava sat up, clutching her mother's locket against her chest. It's over, she whispered, her voice breaking. It's really over. Daniel looked toward the smoking ruins. Maybe, but I'm not sure if something like him ever really dies. Ava turned to him, exhaustion etched into her face. What do you mean? He stood, brushing the dirt from his hands. My father built backup systems, remote ones, hidden in other properties. If he uploaded himself once, he could have done it again. She stared at him, horror creeping back into her chest. So he could still be out there? Daniel didn't answer. He just looked toward the horizon, where the faint glow of city lights flickered in the distance. Ava closed her eyes. Then I'll find him, she whispered. And I'll end it for good. A gust of wind swept through the field, scattering ash and dust. Somewhere in the distance, a faint digital crackle echoed, like a signal trying to reconnect. Ava froze, her blood running cold. Daniel turned toward her. Did you hear that? Before she could respond, the faint sound of a voice drifted from the broken remains of the house. You opened the door once, Ava. You'll open it again. Her heart stopped. The sound faded as quickly as it came, leaving behind only silence. Ava stared at the ruins, tears in her eyes, her voice trembling. I won't make that mistake twice. But deep down she wasn't sure she believed it. The room fell silent as the heavy door creaked open. The noise echoed down the marble hallway, long and eerie, like something from a memory that refused to die. Jessica's heart pounded so hard she could feel the pulse in her throat. For weeks she tried to stay strong, pretending that everything was fine, that the company's secrets didn't haunt her dreams. But now, standing here, facing that door, every ounce of calm she'd built was unraveling. Samuel stood beside her, his hands trembling, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the half-open door. Jessica, he whispered, his voice low, what if it's not just files or evidence behind that door? Jessica swallowed hard. Then we face it anyway. Inside the air was colder. A small light flickered overhead, barely illuminating the room's interior. Stacks of old cardboard boxes lined the walls. The smell of dust and mildew hit them like a wave. On the far side, a desk sat against the wall, a single photograph resting on top of it. Jessica stepped closer, her heels clicking softly against the concrete floor. When she saw the photograph, her knees nearly buckled. It was a picture of her mother. She snatched it up, staring in disbelief. Her mother stood smiling next to a man in a business suit, a younger version of Samuel's father, Richard Lawson, the company's founder. Her mind spun. "What is this doing here?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Samuel frowned, moving closer. "That's my dad, and your mom?" Jessica nodded, unable to form words. Beneath the photo lay an envelope sealed with the Lawson Enterprises insignia. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside were several documents, some old contracts, handwritten notes, and one single birth certificate. Her eyes widened as she read the name. Father, Richard Lawson. Mother, Naomi Carter. Child, Jessica Naomi Carter. The paper slipped from her hand. She took a step back, gasping for air. This can't be real." Samuel's face turned pale. "Jessica, are you saying my father?" She nodded weakly, tears filling her eyes. "I'm saying your father is my father too." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The truth hung heavy between them, suffocating, impossible to accept. Samuel's expression shifted from confusion to horror. He turned away, pacing, his hand running through his hair. That means we're half-siblings," Jessica whispered. "And your father knew." Samuel clenched his fists. "He built an entire company on lies. He told me your mother died in a car crash. He never said anything about—" Her voice broke. "He left her alone, Samuel. He left us alone." Outside, thunder rumbled, deep and distant. It sounded like the world itself was reacting to their discovery. Jessica wiped her tears, trying to steady herself. "We need to confront him. He owes us the truth." Samuel nodded, still dazed. "He's at the office downtown." "But Jessica, my father isn't the same man anymore. He's changed." Jessica turned to face him, her jaw set. "Then he'll finally face what he's done." As they left the room, she glanced one last time at the open door. Everything she'd believed about her past, her struggles, her mother's pain, it all made sense now. The secrets hidden behind that door had reshaped her entire life. When they arrived at the downtown headquarters, the night sky was painted in streaks of silver lightning. The building loomed tall and silent, its glass reflecting flashes of thunder. They entered the elevator, the silence between them growing heavier with every floor. On the top floor, Richard Lawson sat alone in his office, staring at the city lights. His gray hair glimmered in the reflection of the skyline. When he saw Jessica and Samuel walk in, his face stiffened. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Jessica dropped the envelope on his desk. "We found the room, Richard. We know everything." He exhaled, slow and deep. "So, the truth is out." "Why?" Jessica demanded, her voice trembling with rage and heartbreak. "Why did you lie? Why did you abandon my mother?" Richard's eyes softened. "Because I couldn't protect her, Jessica. The company was built on blood and betrayal. If anyone knew I had a child outside my marriage, everything would have fallen apart. So, I made the worst choice a man could make. I walked away." Samuel slammed his fist on the desk. "You didn't just walk away, Dad. You destroyed lives." Richard lowered his head. "I know. And I've lived every day regretting it." Jessica stared at him, her tears streaming silently. "Then why keep it hidden all these years?" Richard hesitated, then opened a drawer and pulled out another file. "Because your mother, she didn't just die, Jessica. She was killed." The room went silent. Jessica froze. "What did you say?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Your mother discovered something about the company, something dangerous. She tried to expose it. I thought I could protect her, but I was too late." Jessica's knees weakened. "Who killed her?" Richard's gaze drifted to the window. "Someone I once trusted, someone who's still here." Outside, lightning flashed and thunder rolled again. Jessica felt the air tighten around her chest. She didn't know it yet, but the man responsible was closer than she ever imagined. The truth about her mother's death wasn't buried in the past. It was still alive, still breathing, still waiting behind another door yet to be opened. The rain hadn't stopped since Jessica and Samuel left Richard's office that night. It poured like a curtain of grief, washing the glass walls of the Lawson Enterprises tower while the city lights shimmered below. Jessica stood by the window, her hands gripping her jacket tightly. Her mother's death, murder, echoed in her mind like a thunderclap she couldn't escape. Samuel sat across from her, silent, his thoughts a storm of their own. He had learned that the woman he'd come to trust, even admire, was his sister, and now the company his family built was drenched in blood and lies. Jessica finally turned. "You said someone still in the company was behind her death. Who is it, Samuel? Who could your father possibly mean?" Samuel looked up, his eyes hollow. "There's only one person who's been around long enough. Someone my father used to trust with everything. Robert Gray." Jessica frowned. "The vice president?" Samuel nodded. "Yeah. He's been with the company since before I was born. Ruthless, ambitious, and loyal, at least that's what my father thought. But lately things haven't added up. He's been deleting old files, moving money through hidden accounts. Dad confronted him once, but he brushed it off as accounting issues." Jessica's jaw tightened. "Then we need to prove it." Samuel hesitated. "You don't know Robert like I do. He's dangerous. If he finds out we're digging, he won't just threaten us, he'll bury us." Jessica's voice hardened. "Then we'll dig quietly." The next morning they returned to the office early before anyone else arrived. Jessica had learned the company's systems during her short employment, and her sharp memory served her well. She slipped into the archives, using Samuel's access code to bypass security. The digital records stretched back decades. Transactions, contracts, and hidden folders that hadn't been opened in years. But one file stood out, a document labeled Project Eden. Jessica clicked it open. Inside were scanned reports from her mother's department, environmental compliance. It detailed illegal chemical dumping near a small town in North Carolina, the same town where her mother had once worked as a consultant. The files showed forged permits, fake safety clearances, and Robert Gray's digital signature on every document. She gasped. "Samuel, look at this." He leaned in, his face paling. "This is worse than I thought. They were poisoning entire water systems to save money, and Mom found out." Jessica's eyes burned with tears. She was going to expose them. That's why she was killed. Before Samuel could respond, a faint noise echoed from the hallway, the sound of shoes clicking steadily on the marble floor. They exchanged a look. "Hide the files," Samuel whispered. Jessica quickly minimized the screen and pretended to sort papers as the door opened. Robert Gray stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, his silver hair slicked back, and an unsettling calm in his cold blue eyes. "Well," he said, smiling faintly, "I didn't expect to find the two of you here so early. Researching something?" Jessica forced a polite smile. "Just reviewing old environmental records, Mr. Gray." He chuckled. "Ah, dedicated. I like that." He stepped closer, his gaze flicking to the computer screen for a brief second before returning to her. "You remind me of your mother, Jessica. Always digging where she shouldn't." Her breath caught. "You knew my mother?" "Oh, quite well," Robert said, leaning on the desk. "Smart woman. Too smart, perhaps. She thought she could save the world by telling the truth. A dangerous thing to do when the truth is worth billions." Samuel stood abruptly. "What are you implying?" Robert turned to him, his expression hardening. "I'm not implying anything, Samuel. I'm stating facts. This company was built on compromise. Your father understood that. Your sister," he added, his voice laced with mockery, "still doesn't." Jessica clenched her fists. "You killed her." Robert smirked, unbothered. "Careful, young lady. Accusations like that can ruin people's lives. Jessica took a step closer, her voice trembling. You ruined hers. For a moment Robert's mask slipped. His eyes darkened, a flicker of something cruel and real flashing through them. She left me no choice, he said quietly. She was going to destroy everything. Lawson Enterprises. My career. Your father's legacy. She had to be stopped. Samuel lunged forward, but Robert stepped back calmly and pulled a small device from his pocket, a security badge. You'll both stay quiet, he said coldly. Because if you don't, I'll make sure the world knows about your little secret. How Lawson's perfect heir and the girl he hired are siblings. That would destroy what's left of your reputation and your future. He turned to leave, but Jessica's voice stopped him. You can't bury the truth forever, Robert. Not this time. Robert paused in the doorway, smiling faintly. Watch me. When he was gone, Jessica's hands shook. Samuel slammed his fist on the desk. He's threatening us now. We can't go to the police, he controls everything. Jessica took a deep breath, her voice steady despite the fear. Then we expose him from the inside. We find proof that can't be erased. Samuel looked at her, uncertain. You're risking everything. Jessica nodded. So did my mother. That night, they broke into Robert's private office using the old maintenance corridor. Inside, the air smelled of expensive cigars and arrogance. Samuel hacked into his system while Jessica searched the drawers. Behind a false panel, she found an old black journal, its leather cover worn, the pages filled with neat handwriting. Flipping through, she froze. The journal detailed every illegal operation, every bribe, every cover-up Robert had orchestrated for decades. And on the last page was an entry dated the night her mother died. It read, She came to confront me. Said she had evidence. Said she'd go to the press. I warned her, but she wouldn't listen. Things got out of hand. She fell. I didn't mean for it to happen. Jessica's heart stopped. Oh my God. Samuel read over her shoulder, speechless. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the sound of the security alarm blared through the building. Robert's voice came through the intercom, cold and measured. I told you not to open that door. Jessica's blood ran cold. He knew they were there. The alarm screamed through the empty building, slicing through the silence like a knife. Red lights flashed against the glass walls of the upper floors, casting long shadows that seemed to chase Jessica and Samuel as they froze in Robert's office. Jessica's pulse raced so fast she could barely hear herself think. He knows we're here, she whispered. Samuel grabbed the black journal and stuffed it inside his jacket. We need to move, now. They rushed toward the exit, but the glass doors had already locked automatically. The office tower was sealed tight, a fortress under Robert Gray's control. The intercom crackled again, his voice dripping with calm menace. You shouldn't have come back, Jessica. Your mother made the same mistake. Jessica spun toward the ceiling speakers. You murdered her, Robert. You covered it up, and now you're trying to silence us too. His chuckle filled the air, low and unbothered. Murder is such an ugly word. I didn't kill your mother, Jessica. She did that to herself when she refused to listen. Samuel slammed his fist against the glass door. Open it, Robert. Let us out. Oh, I will, he replied smoothly. But not until we have a little talk. A faint clicking sound echoed from the hallway. Jessica's eyes darted toward the doorway and froze. The motion sensor lights outside flickered on, one by one, as if someone, or something, was approaching. Samuel, she whispered. We're not alone. They backed away from the door. Footsteps echoed, slow, steady, deliberate. Then the shape of a man appeared in the glass reflection. It wasn't Robert. It was one of the security guards, but his eyes were blank, distant, like he wasn't there of his own will. In his hand was a taser baton, and on his earpiece Robert's voice whispered orders. Make sure they don't leave that room. The guard lunged. Samuel reacted first, grabbing a chair and swinging it into the man's chest. The taser dropped to the floor, sparks flying. Jessica kicked it away, her heart thudding as the man stumbled back. "Come on," Samuel shouted, pulling her toward the emergency exit at the far end. But when they reached it, a red light blinked above the keypad. System locked. Robert's voice returned, calm and confident. "You can't run from the truth, Jessica. You never could. It's in your blood." Jessica froze. "What do you mean?" "Ask your father." She turned to Samuel, confused and terrified. "He's lying. He has to be." But Samuel's face was pale, his eyes darting away. "Jess, there's something you don't know. My father, he told me years ago that the woman he loved before my mother wasn't just a secret affair. He said she worked for the government. An undercover investigator." Jessica blinked. "My mother?" Samuel nodded. "She wasn't just an environmental consultant. She was planted inside Lawson Enterprises to expose corruption. She gathered evidence for years, but she fell in love with my father instead of turning him in. That's why she was being watched." The revelation hit Jessica like a blow. "You're saying Robert knew she was undercover?" "Yes, and when she tried to leave, he made sure she couldn't." The light suddenly went out. The entire floor plunged into darkness. The only light came from the red alarm strobes, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Jessica," Samuel whispered, "we need to get to the server room. If we can copy the files from Robert's system, we can prove everything." They moved through the corridor carefully, guided only by the flashing lights. Somewhere in the shadows, another sound joined the storm outside, the slow, deliberate creak of a door opening. Jessica stopped dead. Her breath caught in her throat. "That sound?" Samuel turned, eyes narrowing. "It's coming from the boardroom." They stepped closer, the sound of rain against the glass mixing with the low hum of electricity. When they peered through the boardroom window, Jessica froze. Inside, Robert stood by the massive conference table, holding a small, silver pistol. His expression was calm, too calm. He looked up and saw them watching. "I told you not to open that door," he said, his voice echoing eerily. "You weren't supposed to find out what she really died for." Jessica's voice trembled with fury. "She died for the truth." Robert smiled faintly. "No, Jessica. She died to protect you." Her stomach twisted. "What?" Robert stepped forward, his gaze steady, his tone sharp. "Naomi Carter didn't just work for the government. She was protecting someone, her daughter. She made a deal with the people she was investigating. She handed them evidence in exchange for your safety. But she realized too late that they wanted more. She came to me that night to stop it, but the people she worked for made sure neither of us talked." Samuel's voice was hoarse. "You're saying someone else ordered her death?" Robert nodded slowly. "The ones behind Project Eden. I took the blame because I couldn't prove who they were. They're still out there, Jessica. And if you release those files, they'll come for you next." Jessica stared at him, her world spinning. "You're lying." Robert's expression darkened. "I wish I were." A sudden explosion of static burst from the speakers overhead. Then another voice cut in, cold, metallic, and unfamiliar. "We warned you, Gray. You should have destroyed those files." Jessica looked up at the ceiling. "Who is that?" Robert's face turned pale. "They found us." Samuel grabbed Jessica's arm. "We have to go, now." The intercom crackled again, and the sound of gunfire echoed faintly through the lower floors. Security wasn't coming. Someone else was inside the building. As they fled down the hallway toward the stairs, Jessica's mind raced with one thought. Her mother had died for something much bigger than a company scandal. And now the people behind it wanted her dead too. The storm outside intensified, lightning flashing against the tower windows as they reached the stairwell door. Behind them, a shadow appeared at the end of the hallway, tall, armed, and moving fast. Jessica froze. The door handle was jammed. Samuel turned, his eyes wide. "Jess, go." But before she could move, a gunshot rang out, deafening in the narrow space. Glass shattered, and someone screamed. The gunshot echoed like thunder inside the stairwell. Jessica's ears rang as she stumbled backward, her heart hammering against her ribs. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. She looked down and saw Samuel clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "Samuel," she cried, dropping to her knees. "I'm fine," he groaned, his voice strained. "Just grazed." Another shot shattered the glass wall behind them. Jessica looked up. The shadow was still coming, moving with cold precision. Whoever this was, wasn't Robert. The figure's black tactical gear and silenced weapon said it all. Professional. Jessica grabbed Samuel by the arm. "We have to move." They bolted down the stairwell, their footsteps echoing off the concrete. Lightning flashed through the high windows as they reached the lower floor, ducking into an empty conference room. Jessica slammed the door shut, breathing hard. "Who are these people?" she whispered. Samuel pulled his phone out, wincing from pain. "They're not company security. These guys are trained, military level. Whoever Robert worked for, they're cleaning up loose ends." Jessica's stomach twisted. "Then we're next." He nodded grimly. "Yeah. Unless we get to that data before they do." The emergency lights flickered. A low rumble shook the building as thunder rolled outside. Jessica wiped sweat and rain from her forehead and turned toward the computer terminals at the far end of the room. "We can access the mainframe from here," she said, moving fast. "If I can transfer those files to a cloud server, we'll have proof of everything. Even if they destroy this place, the truth will survive." Samuel managed a weak grin. "That's my sister, always thinking ahead." She shot him a look that was half a smile, half a tear. "Don't make this the time you get sentimental." Outside, the sound of boots echoed in the hallway. Voices, low, controlled, dangerous. "They're on this floor. Secure the exits." Jessica's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Come on, come on." Suddenly, a voice came through the intercom. Robert's voice, strained but urgent. "Jessica, you need to listen to me. They're not here for you, they're here for the files. Destroy them before they take them. Do you understand?" Jessica froze. "You said we needed to expose them." "You don't understand," Robert said. "Those files don't just prove corruption. They link to government defense contracts, human testing programs, things far worse than what Naomi discovered. If they go public, you'll start a war you can't control." Jessica stared at the screen, torn. "You're lying." "I'm not," Robert snapped. "That's why Naomi tried to stop it. That's why she came to me that night. She wasn't trying to leak it, she was trying to burn it." The realization hit Jessica like ice. Her mother hadn't died to expose the truth, she died trying to bury it. "Jess," Samuel said quietly, his voice breaking through the noise. "If that's true, what do we do?" Jessica's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The progress bar on the screen read, 82% uploaded. She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "If we stop it, they win. But if we finish it, we might be unleashing something we can't take back." The door suddenly burst open. 3 armed men stormed in, faces hidden behind black masks. "Hands up," one barked. Samuel stepped forward instinctively, shielding Jessica. "You're not taking her." The man raised his gun, but before he could fire, a deafening bang erupted behind them. Robert Gray stood in the doorway, his white dress shirt soaked from the rain, a pistol in his hand. "I warned you to stay away from them." The agents turned their weapons toward him. Robert fired twice, 2 sharp, precise shots, and one of the men fell. The others ducked behind the desk, returning fire. Jessica screamed, diving for cover. Samuel dragged her behind the metal table. "Dad," he shouted. Robert fired again, pinning the attackers back. "Get out of here. Now." Jessica looked at the upload bar, 96%. She couldn't stop. "Not now." "Jessica, go," Robert yelled. She ignored him, typing faster. Another bullet tore through the wall beside her. Sparks flew from the computer. 99%. One of the masked men rose from cover, aiming directly at her. Time slowed. She saw the glint of the muzzle, the pull of his finger, and then Robert stepped in front of her. The gun went off. Robert staggered, clutching his chest. His pistol clattered to the floor. Jessica screamed, catching him before he fell. No, no, no. He looked up at her, his breathing shallow, blood staining his collar. Finish it, he whispered. Your mother, she wanted you to choose what's right, not what's easy. Jessica's tears blurred her vision. She turned to the screen. 100%. Upload complete. The files were gone, sent to a secure server outside their reach. Robert smiled faintly. You're stronger than both of us. And then his eyes went still. Jessica froze, unable to breathe. Samuel knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder. We have to move, Jess. We have to go. Outside, the fire alarms blared. Smoke began to fill the corridor. One of the masked men had dropped a small device, a detonator. Jessica's heart dropped. They're going to blow the building. Samuel grabbed her hand. Come on. They ran through the smoke-filled hallways, coughing, stumbling. The stairwell was collapsing behind them. Flames licked the edges of the walls. By the time they burst through the lobby doors into the storm, the entire tower was burning. Sirens wailed in the distance. Jessica collapsed on the pavement, soaked and shaking. She looked up at the tower, Lawson Enterprises, once a monument of power, now a pillar of fire. Samuel crouched beside her, wincing in pain. You did it, Jess. The truth's out there now. She stared at the flames. Yeah, but at what cost? The rain poured harder, washing away the blood on her hands, the smoke from her hair, and the last remnants of the company that had destroyed everything she loved. As the tower collapsed inward with a deafening roar, Jessica whispered softly, You told me not to open that door, but I had to. A single flash of lightning lit the night sky, and for a brief moment she could almost see her mother's face in the reflection of the flames, smiling, proud. But deep down, Jessica knew this wasn't the end. Because the people behind Project Eden weren't gone. They were out there watching, waiting. And they knew her name now. The morning light filtered softly through the hospital blinds, casting thin gold stripes across Jessica's face. For the first time in months, she slept peacefully, no nightmares, no screams echoing down the hallways of her mind. Daniel sat by her bedside, watching her chest rise and fall. He hadn't left since the surgery, since the night she'd saved him again from the shadows of his past. Outside, the world went on. Reporters swarmed the front gate, headlines spoke of corporate conspiracies and hidden crimes. But inside this quiet room, time stood still. When Jessica's eyes fluttered open, the first thing she saw was Daniel's tired smile. Hey, he said gently. She smiled faintly. You look worse than me. He chuckled. You're the one who took a bullet. Her hand reached toward his, weak but sure. And you're the one who opened the door. Those words hung in the air, soft but loaded, a reminder of the door she had once screamed not to open. The door that hid the truth, the one that changed everything. Later that afternoon, the police chief visited. Jessica, he began, we recovered everything. The documents, the recordings, it's all there. Raymond's operation, the offshore accounts, the blackmail, the kidnappings. You helped us bring down something that's been buried for over a decade. Jessica nodded slowly. Her voice trembled. I didn't do it alone. She looked at Daniel, then at the window where the world waited. He believed me, even when he didn't understand. The chief smiled faintly. You're both lucky. Most people don't get to face their past and survive it. 2 weeks later, Daniel held a small press conference. The media gathered like vultures, waiting to feast on scandal. Cameras flashed, voices overlapped, and every question cut sharper than the last. Mr. Grayson, is it true your brother was behind the cover-up? Did Jessica actually save your life twice? Will Grayson Technologies recover from this? Daniel raised his hand, silencing the chaos. Yes, he said firmly. It's all true. My brother, Raymond Grayson, was responsible for crimes that I can never justify or erase. But this isn't a story about corruption, it's a story about courage. He turned slightly, motioning to Jessica, who stood beside him, dressed simply, eyes calm but fierce. This woman, Daniel continued, his voice steady, risked her life to expose the truth. When everyone else told her to stay quiet, she screamed, because she saw what we refused to see. And because of that, lives were saved. A hush fell over the crowd. The flashbulbs dimmed. In that moment, Jessica wasn't just the girl who warned him, she was the woman who forced the world to listen. That evening, back at the estate, Jessica stood before the heavy oak door. The same one. It had been replaced, freshly painted, but she could still hear the echo of her voice in her memory, the scream that started it all. Daniel joined her quietly. You sure you want to do this? She smiled. It's just a door now. Slowly she reached for the handle and turned it. The hinges creaked softly, a sound once terrifying, now strangely peaceful. Behind it was only an empty study. Clean walls. Sunlight on new wood floors. No secrets. No monsters. She exhaled deeply. See? Nothing left to fear. Daniel nodded. Maybe not here. He looked at her, eyes softening. But wherever you go next, I hope you never stop screaming for what's right. Jessica chuckled lightly, brushing a tear from her cheek. I don't plan to. Weeks passed. The world moved on, but Jessica didn't go back to anonymity. She began speaking, at schools, on small podcasts, at community events, about fear, about truth, about the cost of silence. One night, after a long talk in New Orleans, she received a letter. No name. No return address. Inside was a single sentence. Thank you for opening the right door. Her heart pounded. She smiled, folding the note slowly. Outside the rain poured, steady, cleansing. She looked up at the sky and whispered, You're welcome. But just as she turned off her lamp, her phone buzzed. A text message appeared from an unknown number. Unknown, you stopped one door, but there's another. Basement. Grayson Industries, New York branch. Her blood ran cold. She looked toward the window, lightning flashing in the distance. The past had been buried once, but not completely. Jessica's voice was calm but resolute. Then I guess we're not done yet. She picked up her coat, slid her phone into her pocket, and stepped into the storm. Her eyes filled with that same fire that had once saved a man's life. The night swallowed her silhouette, but one thing was certain. Jessica had learned to never fear what's behind the door. Because now she knew how to open it,